I just got another call about CP. He got his dick stuck in a hot tub.
All right, see you later.
All right.
All right, go get him.
CP rhymes with TP. Am I fucking right? Am
I don't
right?
get it, but I love it.
Oh.
What's up? This is Michael Rapport, or as that motherfucker CP calls me, What's His Cock from True Romance, and you're watching WILIscredia. CP, you motherfucker. You know who the fuck I am from True Romance, you motherfucker. And what the fuck is a WILIscredia? Who the fuck knows what a WILIscredia is anyway?
I'm your huckleberry.
Hello one, hello all, it's here. It's happening. It's finally happening. After, what, half a year? How many months in advance did we plan this, Jase?
Dude, we planned this like probably 6-7 months ago, and we've been like talking so often off air, and we've just been talking too much about this, really.
Well, so in to credit Jase. Oh, first of all, Jase, welcome. Say hi.
Yep. Hey everyone, I'm Jase, as you all know, Movieman Jase formerly, and yeah, really excited to be here. I would say Westerns is one of my favorite genres of all time. Loved it since I was a boy, and it's a genre that's very close to my heart, so I'm very excited to talk about it and share all my knowledge, show off maybe a tiny bit, and just educate some of you guys, especially some of the younger guys, on this genre, because it's somewhat of a dying genre.
So Jase will be doing most of the talking. He's a bit of the on-hand expert. I'll just be feeding.
I got my water, guys. So I cleared my throat, so I'm ready to talk Westerns for the next maybe couple hours. So it's very.
So I'm in way over my head, and I told Jase, I said I need to watch at least 2 or 3 Westerns before this thing happens, and Jase has been gracious enough to wait and let me catch up, and I've taken in close to 10. The Man with No Name trilogy.
Yeah, you did 10,
about
and
that?
we even did actually a private stream, where we did a movie watch of one of the movies we'll talk about very soon. So I waited and waited. I kept almost put a gun to his head to watch some of these westerns, and I've been telling him give this genre a chance. and I think he's
I'm
started
coming
to
around.
appreciate it a
I'm
little
coming
bit.
around.
So.
Another benefit
Yep.
is, so we based this list off the 1001 movies you must see before you die. This is the 2019 edition, as you can tell by this must-see movie here on the cover. Yikes. So we have the most up-to-date as of October version of the book. I will not be referencing this book because the font is tiny. I have my own notes, so that now I'm putting the book down. And what's that? Were you about to cut me off?
No, I was just saying, like, he's got all his notes
Yeah.
ready. Cause
That's all I'm going to be doing.
So,
Just
don't worry, guys. I've got notes as well, because some of these movies, like, you'll see, because we're going to basically go through the book first, and then maybe the second half of the stream, I'm going to sort of talk about what I think should be included and things like that. So probably going to go into a few westerns that maybe you guys are more familiar with, and maybe CP's actually seen.
Sure. Well, that's the great thing about, like, anything in art. It's all subjective, and we're all opinion based. So, while Jase's must-see list for westerns might have certain films, you guys watching might have different films, and here we are reading a book that is the authority on the 1001 movies you must see. So it's fun to have a discussion and open it up and see what would be on everybody's desert island, so to speak. So
That's right.
So without further ado, this is the Western category, the entire Western category in the 1001 movies you must see before you die. So the first film, this is alphabetical order. The first film, 1974's Blazing Saddles, directed by Mel Brooks.
Oh. And already, I've had so many discussions with this movie off air. Like, a few of my friends who are also Western fans from YouTube. And sorry to say, because I'm very much a traditional Western guy. So I actually don't consider this movie a Western. Mm-hmm. I see it as a comic spoof of a Western. So it sort of grinds my gears a little bit that it's even in that book as a Western. Like, put it in the comedy, fine, but I'm not really a huge fan of the movie in general, just because it kind of, in a way mocks the Western genre a little bit.
Taking digs, like Spaceballs is a sci-fi. It's having fun.
Exactly, and Young Frankenstein kind of does it off the horror genre. So Mel Brooks is like that. All his movies kind of make fun of certain genres, and Blazing Saddles does that well for the Westerns. But I just don't think I'd put that in 1001 Before You Die for Westerns anyway. I don't think
I just want to go on record and say, so far, I have seen 100% of the movies on this list.
Well, hey, Gene Wilder is one of his better movies, right? So,
sure.
I mean, it's had that couple of songs in there, and
it's a must. It's a must see, but not in the Western category. Right? For comedy, probably, but not for Western.
Probably for comedy, but because it's like, I always compare it like the Austin Powers movies to the James Bond films. Like, the James Bond films are like spy thrillers, action films. The Austin Powers are basically just making fun of that, and that's kind of what Blazing Saddles is, and what Mel Brooks does in general. So it's not for me. I'm sorry for the guy. I know it's a pretty popular film, but I'm just too traditional. I can't keep away from those elements that you will talk about soon. So it's no.
Felix, $5 super chat. Thank you very much. That book lost all authority when it put that movie on the cover. No comments, sir. Felix said that.
Felix?
I do not disagree.
I'm glad you agree. I agree too. Glad.
Okay, so next on the list, again, alphabetical order, Western category. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969, George Roy Hill.
Yep.
Oh, look at this. He's got props.
There we go. There's the first digibook. There we go. So my boy Paul in there, Sundance Kid as I call him. This is definitely one of the best Westerns of all time. Paul Newman as Butch Cassidy and Robert Redford as Sundance Kid. And it's very iconic. I love this film to bits. I probably watch it at least once or twice a year. It's a funny film because these two are actually outlaws in the film, but we're rooting for them the whole way because, they rob the train, and then these sort of middle of the film, they have these trackers come after them. So Lord Baltimore and this Indian tracker as well. And the whole way you're rooting for them, it's very comedic as well, and it just has a lot of sort of the bonding the two friends together, and they end up in Bolivia, and then the Bolivian army comes after them, and yeah, it's sort of a heartwarming film at the end because they mention, like, sort of a spoiler, I think everyone's seen it by now, but it's sort of talking about, oh, maybe we should have gone to Australia, and then they get in a big shootout where they get gunned down. So yeah, it's a great one. I highly recommend Butch Cassidy. It's got a great soundtrack. Burt Bacharach does the Raindrops Falling on My Hip. You got Catherine Ross as like the love interest. She sort of plays between both of them. She kind of tags along, but then realizes, look, these guys don't want to do it straight. They just want to be an outlaw. Because they kind of try and do that midway through the movie. They try to go straight, but it just isn't for them. The outlaw is the way of life for those guys. So yeah, it's a classic. Can't say much more about it. It's just got everything you want in the Western genre. And I think it works well because it has comedic elements, but not too silly, not like a Blazing Saddles. It just sort of borders that. And yeah, it's just got that really great friendship. And I think the chemistry between Robert Redford and Paul Newman is excellent. And you see that because they do another movie later on called The Sting, which isn't a Western, but it's a great movie, sort of crime film. So yeah, I love it. And definitely one of my favorites of all time. It's probably my top 10 favorite Westerns of all time.
Jase, is that Warner, that movie?
This one is it's 20th Century Fox, this particular digibook. So yeah, I think it is. This one came out. I actually got this from Robbie, Voodoo Magic. So I don't know if he's watching, but I persuaded him to finally give it to me because I know he's a big fan of this too. So thanks to him.
All right, so must. That's on the must list, huh?
That's a must, everyone. Butch Cassidy is a must.
All right, so
yep.
Here we go. No C-lettered Westerns that are in the book.
Okay.
Yep. Next is Dances with Wolves, 1990, Kevin Costner.
DVD. Yeah, tells you. That kind of tells you my feelings on the film. Yeah, I mean, I think this won a couple of Academy Awards, including Best Picture in 1990. I think it beat out Goodfellas.
I think so.
Which was quite a shock. And I've never really been a fan of it. I think just because it's quite long-winded. Basically, I think sets after the Civil War. Kevin Costner kind of is in the wilderness and he tries to commit suicide, and he ends up sort of befriending all these American Native Indians, and it kind of goes into the sort of mystical, almost supernatural thing with the wolf and that kind of thing. I don't know. I just never been really a fan of it. There's nothing that redeeming for me or likable or hugely memorable. I don't remember much about this film, to be honest with you. Like, I just don't have any sort of vivid moments that I could say, I love that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin Costner's all right. He's done better Westerns than this, but... So you've seen
yes. So far I've seen 2 of 3. Let's keep that stat up.
2 of 3. You're doing well.
I'll say if you want to see a version of this, just watch Avatar. It's the same kind of story, isn't it? It's basically Avatar, right?
It's basically Avatar in Western times. As I said, it's just, I don't know. Kevin Costner's done better Westerns. Like Open Range was really good. He's done Wide Earp as well. I think he directed. Did he actually?
He directed Dances with Wolves.
Yeah. So. He's done some better Westerns than this one. So I probably, if you're putting a gun saying must see before you die, I probably wouldn't for this one because it just doesn't have the sort of traditional elements that I look for Western or anything like likable. So
it's like
too overly.
It's like you said, there's nothing really memorable about it. I mean, I think must-see films, you would have something that you'd be like, oh, there's blank that you.
We just covered Butch Cassidy, and I can remember so many great lines, so many great moments, like really iconic moments that, after you watch a film, it's like, I love this, or I have emotions with it. It didn't evoke any emotions at all. So yeah.
Okay, so that's a no. That's a no from both of us. I get to report on that one. So next on the list is 1995's Dead Man from Jim Jarmusch, with Johnny Depp, I believe.
Yep, and there it is, the Criterion edition.
Okay.
So this one is quite a different take on the Western genre. It sort of follows Johnny Depp, who plays William Blake, who's an accountant, but he kind of gets mixed up in like a gunfight. Something goes wrong, and it sort of goes into the sort of mystical, supernatural feeling because he meets a Native American Indian, and it's sort of, after that, it's kind of his journey into the afterlife. So it sort of blends between what's real and what's not. It has a really cool soundtrack. It's got like this rock and roll guitar, and it's really upbeat. Robert Mitchum actually is in this for a little while. It's actually his last ever film.
Oh.
He was a very famous Western actor and also drama actor. Obviously, Night of the Hunter is one of his great films. So yeah, this one it's interesting. Like, it has a lot of Johnny Depp's got it's got great gunfights in there. There's a lot of interesting characters. It's just very bleak because it's
Jim Jarmusch. No.
Yeah, it's very bleak. It's very mystical, and as I said, like I've only seen this film I think once. I watched this I think last year because this movie just came out on Criterion not long ago. So yeah, I'm sort of in the between if I would put it in the list.
Really?
I probably would, because I think it's a great sort of modern tale of the Western and kind of different to your traditional way. So I think if you're building up a list, you don't want all the same type of Westerns in there. So this one's kind of, as I said, offbeat, and I think Johnny Depp does a really good job. He kind of did a lot of good movies in the mid-'90s, early 90s as well. So yeah, I think it's quite good.
And if that were in my house, I probably would have watched it by now, and not the S-word movie that we'll get to eventually.
Exactly. So there it is, guys. Dead Man. I'm putting it in.
That's a yes, huh? Okay.
Yep.
So 1939's Destry Rides Again from George Marshall.
Yeah, this one's with James Stewart, and I haven't seen this one for a very, very long time. I think that I watched this one as a boy, so I had to sort of research this a little bit. It's basically, there's this like wild western town, and this young sheriff sort of son, it's a hard-nosed sheriff. He goes into this town, and he has a son, and he sort of takes control of the town, or tries to take control of this like western town, and things go wrong. Again, it's very like tame and not that like, there's not a lot of elements to it. It sort of just stays on the one note the whole time. And I'm not like the biggest Jimmy Stewart fan in a lot of these westerns, especially the early ones. I feel that it's kind of tame. Not a lot of things happen. So I probably, as I said, I wouldn't put this on this list because I've only seen it once. It's okay, but yeah, I don't really have much to say about this one. It's whatever. It's one of those one-time watches for me.
Okay, if you guys aren't seeing the visual aids, let me know, because it seems to be an issue. I'm not going to let it hold me back. I'm just trying to look a little pretty, and it doesn't seem to be cooperating. If you can see the pictures, let me know. But if you can't, then my worst fears have been recognized. But next on the list is El Topo from 1970 from Alejandro Jodorowsky.
There it is. And this is actually one of my boys, Hoax's, one of his favorite westerns. And yeah, this is actually called an acid western. And what an acid western actually is, it's a blend between a sort of like an original western and a spaghetti western. So it sort of blends both into it, and you get an acid one. And I don't know what I can really say about this one. I kind of struggled watching this.
Okay.
I watched it probably a couple of years ago now. And again, it's sort of, I don't know if you've seen some of his other movies. I think Holy Mountain's quite a recognizable movie. He kind of goes into that sort of spiritual, mystical sort of elements to it. And because I kind of thought it was going to be like a spaghetti western, but it didn't really go into that. And it's sort of not even totally a western in some ways. You know, he's wearing a cowboy hat and he's driving around the horse, like riding around the horse, and he's got this boy on top of him.
Let me stop you there for a second, because I know I don't understand what you're saying. And for people who aren't familiar with the Western genre, can you tell us what the difference between a traditional Western and a spaghetti Western are?
Yeah, well, spaghetti Western is films that are actually they were made in Italy and Spain. Okay. So a lot of like Sergio Leone was the famous director, which we've talked about quite a bit. We'll talk about later, that a lot in the coming moments. A lot of those movies were made, as I said, in Italy, Spain, had a lot of Italian actors. Well, obviously the general Westerns are all made in America, like the John Wayne, your Gary Cooper, and all that sort of thing. So you sort of like blend the two, and that's what you get, this sort of offbeat genre called acid westerns. There's not a lot of them. There's a couple, as I said, El Topo's one, The Shooting is another one, and they're just sort of like, as I said, it's kind of a mismatch of both, and I don't really think that works for a genre. Again, as I talked about a bit earlier, with a traditional Western, I kind of need those elements to really appreciate it and enjoy it. So this is probably a no from me.
Okay. And again, like I must stick to the high end of the alphabet because this one I've seen, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966, Sergio Leone.
Why don't you take it away first?
Yeah,
Since you've seen it.
I'm happy that I'm here. Almost half of the movies I've seen so far, but
By the way,
it's going to erase rather quickly.
Kino Lorber, boys.
Yeah, the third film of the Man with No Name trilogy technically isn't really a trilogy now, is it?
Not technically. I mean, Clint Eastwood kind of plays the same guy, but he has a different name in all three films. Like in the first film, Fistful of Dollars, he's Joe. The second one, he's Manco, and in the Good, Bad, and the Ugly, which we're talking about, it's Blondie. So it's kind of, and then this film is kind of a prequel to the other two, because at the end of Good, Bad, and the Ugly, he picks up his poncho, the very famous poncho that we see in the other two films, and obviously it has that spectacular duel, which is what's famous for. And I mean, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, when you're talking about westerns, it's high up there. You cannot go through a western genre without talking about Good, Bad, and the Ugly. It's got a wonderful score by Ennio Morricone, like so memorable. It's got some great characters. It's set during the Civil War, but it focuses on three characters. You got Blondie, Clint Eastwood, the very great Lee Van Cleef as Angel Eyes, and of course Eli Wallach, who played Tuco. And these three men, they're after this like gold that's buried in a cemetery, and they've all got a piece of information, and they sort of like betray each other and then sort of team up. They have this uneasy alliance a little at times, and it sort of ends up in this great spectacle at the end in the cemetery where they have this great duel, and for about 10 minutes they're just sort of eyeing each other off, and you know, it flashes to their eyes, to the guns, and the epic music's building and building, and you can't beat that. Right. You really can't for a Western. It's just great. Even when Tuco's running through the cemetery with the Exodus of Gold music playing, it's just awesome. And just having the Civil War background, like that's going on in the meantime where these guys are doing their thing, and it's just crazy. So I love this movie a lot, and love the Dollars trilogy in general, and we'll talk about probably the other two movies later on because I don't know if they're in the book. So
so this I only recently saw for the first time in the last couple of weeks. I thought, thinking of a trilogy, I was going to say that very rarely do you have the third entry of a trilogy that is as strong in comparison to the first two as we do here, but technically it's not a trilogy, so perhaps that argument can not even be had. But from me, it's a 5-star film. It's incredible, and again, I don't know much about westerns. I just know that the last, like you said, the last 10 minutes. I would even say the last act, the last third of the movie.
Yeah, just when they sort of see the Civil War, and they sort of help the captain listen to that blowing up of the bridge, and how it's just
epic. It's cinema personified. It really is it builds to this crescendo, and what baffles me is it has an interesting statistic that it doesn't have any Oscar nominations, and it could, not even for music. right not even for the score, which is, you look at the list of things that were nominated that year, and this could be the most legendary piece of music to come out of that year for film. And just a bunch of things. Cinematography, I think, was on point.
Cinematography is amazing. Just even the beginning when you have Lee Van Cleef visits that family, and he obviously kills them, and he's just sitting there for that first 10 minutes. There's no words spoken. He's just sitting there eating the soup, and then it's like it just goes, and that's just a great scene as well. And then when he goes back to his boss and tells them like, oh, he's giving me this information, and just the whole way through, like what I love about it as well, like, particularly Clint Eastwood's character and Lee Van Cleef's are very mystical, sort of mysterious characters. Like, we don't know much about him. We find more about Tuco because obviously he visits his brother in the monastery. His brother's actually a priest. So he went his way. Tuco went like the outlaw way, and you find out that he hasn't seen his family, and he kind of says to Clint Eastwood, I'm all alone in the world. It's just you and me. So, you find more about him. So more of the human element, while the other two are more mystical characters in the genre, so in the movie itself. So I kind of like that, and I just think Clint Eastwood is great. And as I said, Sergio Leone's just a master of painting pictures on the screen. You know what I mean?
I like the fact that as much as the title says otherwise, there's no real good guy in this movie. There's just a less bad person. They're all kind of bad.
That's the thing, and I probably mentioned this a couple of times. I sort of mentioned it with Butch Cassidy. A lot of westerns do focus on like outlaws and like characters that you shouldn't like, but you kind of do anyway.
Anti-hero.
And that's kind of how a lot of traditional westerns are made. They're focused on like outlaws, gunfighters who are not good people. They're not, but you kind of fall in love with them and sort of relate to them in some way. So yeah, definitely a must.
Absolutely.
Guys who haven't seen it in the chat, watch it.
As a recently converted Western guy, I can say yes, absolutely. With not even for the Western genre, which I can't speak to, just as far as films are concerned, it's a must see. Like if we were just talking in general, I would say yes. But yeah. Next is The Great Train Robbery, which the year was too small and I couldn't read it.
1903.
Yeah. Let's see, I knew it wasn't 83, so I was like, wait a minute.
This is only a 12-minute sort of short film. It's a silent film, and this is technically the first Western ever made. So you can watch it on YouTube. It basically just focuses on a very simple gang of outlaws taking over a train, and that's basically it. It's just 12 minutes, and it has a very iconic shot at the end, which people who follow Westerns and know Westerns know, like the gunfighter kind of points at the screen, almost has like a 3D effect in some little way.
Yeah.
For 1903, it's crazy.
In that time, they hadn't, they weren't very well versed with film. They thought, a lot of people at the theater thought that they were being shot at that point. This is a very popular film in film school, at least for that. The shot is replicated of the gunfighter shooting at the screen. In Goodfellas, the last shot is Joe Pesci shooting at the screen.
That's right. That's exactly right. And yeah, as I said, like if you're studying film or want to get into history, and obviously being a Western fan, you kind of got to watch it just for that purpose. So it's just on YouTube. I watched it, and it's not really much else to say.
Is it a must see?
I mean, unless you're a history buff, probably not. I mean, you could probably go in your life without watching it, but if you're really into cinema and want to know the history of it, history of Westerns, watch it. I mean, it's only 12 minutes of your life, or whatever it is. So
it's a gentle must. It won't hurt. It's only 12 minutes. Don't worry about it.
It won't hurt.
So next is The Gunfight at the OK Corral, 1957, John Sturges. And he's got everything.
Oh, here we go. There it is. So this is Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster, and you could probably relate to this one in some way because this is kind of like Tombstone. It follows Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday.
Oh yeah, the OK Corral.
Yeah, there it is. So it's basically just another telling of that story. I'm sure most Western buffs know about like Wyatt Earp. He was like a famous gunfighter in Dodge City. And then he sort of came down to Tombstone with his family and brothers and sort of set up shop in a town called Tombstone. And he has a friend, doctor named Doc Holliday, who was like an alcoholic and a drug user. And they kind of formed this not uneasy alliance, but, just a nice little partnership together. And as I said, in this movie, they kind of go up against the Clayton gang, which we'll talk about in the Tombstone, and also My Darling Clementine. So for me, personally, I don't probably put that in the 1001 Before You Die just because there's better retellings of this story. It's just the same kind of thing as My Darling Clementine and kind of Tombstone, which you've seen. So it's good. I've never been a huge Burt Lancaster fan in these Westerns. He's probably done better Westerns than this. Kirk Douglas is obviously really good, but yeah, again, he's probably done better Westerns than this. This is kind of one of those movies that kind of passes you by. Watch it once and you're probably not going to come back because you'll just want to see the story being told in a better way somewhere else.
That's not very musty if you ask me.
Not very musty at all. So I mean, I do own it on Blu-ray, but I probably have no urge to watch it anymore.
I have stuff that I own on Blu-ray. Doesn't mean it's must see. That's for damn certain. So next on the list is 1952's High Noon from Fred Zinnemann.
Fred Zinnemann, and there it is. I've got it sealed still. This is the Masters of Cinema
unopened.
Yeah, Unopened. This is a very famous Western with Gary Cooper and Grace Kelly. This is basically your traditional Western at heart. This came, as you said, 1952. It's basically on a sheriff, Gary Cooper, who's put this villain away called Frank Miller. He's gone away to a prison, I think it could even be Yuma prison, and he's sort of been released eventually, and he's coming to face the sheriff, Gary Cooper, in this one-on-one showdown, this great duel, and it sort of builds the tension as the movie comes along because he knows this killer's coming to face him. And it's just, yeah, it's very simple. It keeps going on the clock, like at high noon, this is where the showdown's going to happen. So it has that traditional element that all Western buffs know, and even all movie fans know. You know, a Western's between the two gunfighters facing each other, and that's what this film really focuses on. It's got a nice little cameo with Lee Van Cleef at the beginning in one of his earlier films. Obviously, Grace Kelly is a great actress. She's been in a lot of Hitchcock films, and yeah, Gary Cooper, along with John Wayne and like Robert Mitchum and some of those other actors, he's one of the sort of very iconic Western guys. So it's a good one, and I would definitely put it in the list.
It's a must, huh?
Yep.
Okay. So next is 1973's High Plains Drifter, which was directed by Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood. So this one is one I definitely want you to watch because I really think you'll love it. This is actually the first Western that Clint Eastwood actually directed. The first film he ever did was Play Misty for Me, but then he finally got into the Western genre. And I'm really glad he did because this kind of set the tone, because the Westerns in the late 60s to early 70s, it was kind of dying. It's kind of a dying genre, and we'll talk about a bit about that a bit later on. So this is kind of the retelling and the reliving of the genre in the 70s. Love High Plains Drifter. It's just about this mysterious gunfighter who comes into his town, and he's not a good guy. The first few minutes, he's killed 3 guys, he's raped a woman, and it just goes from there. And he's trying to teach this town a lesson because it sort of goes into this mystical element of he has this dream about this sheriff that's been whipped and cow-whipped and eventually killed, and it kind of, is Clint Eastwood a ghost? Is he the ghost of this guy? Is he an avenging angel? Who is this Clint Eastwood guy? Why is he doing this to this town? And he's sort of teaching this town to sort of fend for themselves, because in the meantime, there's these 3 outlaws that are coming to this town to teach this town a lesson, because the town betrayed them. They sort of said to them, like, you've taken all this money, so we're going to put you in prison. And then Clint Eastwood kind of tells them, like, yeah, you got to do it for yourselves. I'm not going to do it for you. So it's a great film. It's got a lot of great shootouts, a lot of memorable lines, and Clint Eastwood's just a badass in this film. He really is.
Can't you say that for a bunch of stuff that Clint Eastwood's in?
Yeah, pretty much. And this is the beginning of it. This is where it all began. So
is it
I
must see?
Drifter. It's a must see. It definitely is. Love it. That must list is growing.
Yeah. We got 5 on the must list so far. It's about half and half with the book. Next is 1971's The Hired Hand, directed by Peter Fonda.
Okay, let's see. Where have I got that? That should be here somewhere. Or did I even bring it?
Oh, no.
Might not.
Yeah, so in the chat, they're trying to guess. Yes, we're going in alphabetical order, so if you've expected Hateful Eight, it is not in the book. At least not listed in the Western genre. So it might be in the book for drama, although I don't know why would they list Blazing Saddles in the Western genre and not Hateful Eight. Also, Django Unchained, not in the book, at least in the Western genre.
Okay, so I don't know where it is, but I'll find it later. It's an Arrow Academy. It's actually directed and starring Peter Fonda and Warren Oates. And again, it's not your traditional Western. It's a guy that sort of leaves his wife and kid and goes off with Warren Oates to explore the West, and then it sort of goes from there. And into the middle of the film, he comes back and sort of tries to rekindle his relationship. So I wouldn't call it really a Western technically. It's sort of more of a buddy sort of drama movie in a way. It kind of has that element, but not totally. So yeah, I don't think I'd put it in the list, to be honest. I mean, I love Peter Fonda. He actually did this film just straight after Easy Rider. I think this might have been one of his first directions, and it's good because him and Warren Oates have this great chemistry in the film, but I wouldn't probably put it in the Western genre.
Okay. So next is 1963's HUD, directed by Martin Ritt.
I should have that. Yeah, here we go. And this actually just came out in Australia on Blu-ray. I don't think it's got any Blu-ray release in the US.
You got to pull it a little closer to your face. Yep. Oh, or just block it.
There you go. There we go. So yeah, this is Paul Newman, who's actually one of my favorite actors. And again, this is not really your traditional Western. This focuses on like a rebellious young guy who sort of worked for his dad on a cattle ranch, and it kind of goes from there. So again, it's more of a drama. It doesn't have like any shootouts or anything like that. It's sort of the growing up of a teenager, actually a young Brandon Roofs in this, who is the young boy in Shane. He's kind of a little bit more grown up in this, and sort of he follows the rebellion of Paul Newman, and he sort of thinks he's cool and hip. You know, Paul Newman's speeding around in cars, trying to pick up girls, while his dad is so like strict, and he's like trying to teach him to, you know, do the cattle ranch and be a good person generally, but Paul Newman just so rebellious. And this is just a really great film. I think Martin Ritt did this. I think same guy did Ombre, and I really enjoy it. You probably wouldn't put it in the Western genre, but for a must-see before you die, I probably would, just generally, because it's really well acted by Paul Newman. It's really rewatchable, has a lot of great iconic moments, and I really enjoyed it a lot. So I'm a big Paul Newman fan.
So
that's hard.
So Jase, there's something that I noticed when I was doing a little bit of homework, is that there are a handful of names that you would associate with the genre, and for better or worse, names like Clint Eastwood. I guess Paul Newman did a couple. Obviously, John Wayne.
John Wayne, which we'll get to soon.
So what?
Gary
Cooper, right? That was the other one I was looking for. Why do you think these stars had like specific, like we don't have something like that now? I guess maybe action stars, but they tend to.
I think it was just the time, dude. Because I mean, I'm glad you brought this up, because like obviously nowadays we're getting a lot of superhero movies, right? Back in the day, in the early 50s, 40s, 50s, early 60s, Western was probably one of the biggest genres. That was the superhero movies that we see today. So a lot of these big stars, that was their big breaks, to be in these big Westerns by these big directors like John Ford, Howard Hawks, Clint Eastwood eventually. So I think that's what it was. You know, that was the attraction. Westerns was the big thing, like superheroes were now. So yeah, that's why they wanted to do it. I think they fitted in well. It was kind of like the man's man world back then too. Obviously, a lot of the actresses were just side characters. It was a lot of men leading these movies. So yeah, I think that's what it is, dude.
There's a lot of controversy of the lack of Hateful Eight. Guys, I'll look at the book and try to get to the bottom of it. We have the most up-to-date edition of the book, so.
Well, we can talk about Hateful Eight.
We'll get to it.
Probably would get into that.
We've got Jase's list, which isn't the book, and then we'll discuss other stuff. But next on the list is Johnny Guitar from 1954, directed by Nicholas Ray.
Yep. Nicholas Ray did a lot of noir films like Rebel Without a Cause, They Live by Night, and this one is definitely against the traditional elements of a Western. This stars the very famous Joan Crawford. She sort of owns like a bar, and she kind of falls in love with this sort of gunslinger guitar man, Sterling Hayden, who was in the Killing, and also what was the other one? Was it Killer's Kiss? It was one of the two. Anyway, oh no, that's right, the Doctor Strangelove as well. So two of Kubrick's films, and it kind of is actually a battle between woman and woman. So it sort of reverses the role, because a lot of Westerns are always about like the gunslingers and the men, but this one is quite a feminist take on the West, and it sort of goes into sort of the sexual politics of it, and it's very different. And I think Joan Crawford kind of led the front on that in her films. A lot of her films are kind of like that, very in your face, and yeah, it's quite an interesting one, very colorful.
So I've verified and checked. This book does cover 2015. Hateful Eight is not in the book, but that is Star Wars The Force Awakens must see as far as this book is concerned. Hateful Eight, not as much. So it covers the year. Hateful Eight's not in it. start arguing. Anyway.
Yep, start arguing. So yeah, back on Johnny.
Sorry.
I've only seen it. It's okay. I've only seen it once, and I actually don't own that one. But yeah, it's different because there's that role reversal. The woman in the film are the leading powers, Joan Crawford, and I can't remember the actress's name. She's got a really interesting name, but it's like a fight between those two over this man and this sort of town. And yeah, it's cool, but I probably wouldn't put it in there for me. It's one-time watch.
Okay. Next is Little Big Man, 1970, Arthur Penn. Oh, we got our first.
I'll tell you this. This is all. I'll say two things. I had this movie in my collection back there. I got rid of it. That's pretty much says it all. Yeah. I'm not really a big fan of this movie at all. I know a lot of people like it. It stars obviously Dustin Hoffman, and he was doing a lot of great films during this period. It sort of goes through the sort of age of Western. He sort of gets brought up by Indians, and then he becomes like a gunfighter, and then he gets like married. I think Faye Dunaway's in it as well, very famous actress. But yeah, it's too like satirical and comical for me. You probably noticed the theme, like anything that gets comical, satirical in my Westerns, I'm very protective over it.
Out of here.
I get very protective. So, I mean, Dustin Hoffman's good. He's a great actor in that time, but yeah,
the first
in the bin for me.
First rule of comedy is to learn to laugh at yourself. So, and what is it? Imitation's the highest form of flattery. So, next.
But yeah,
it's a no from me, dog.
Big no.
Man of the West, 1958, directed by Anthony Mann, and of course, Jase has it.
Oh, yep. There it is, guys. Gary Cooper again.
Yep.
And so, just like kind of like High Noon, this sort of tells a story of a man that's sort of given away the West. Like he's given away his gun. He's sort of put away that gunfighter life, and he's just trying to live a simple life. He sort of tries to become a teacher, and he tries to raise a lot of money for this school that he's trying to do. But then, as a lot of these Westerns tend to happen, he falls back into that life, and that's pretty much the movie. It's quite a very simple movie. I think it's only about 70, 80 minutes. And I kind of like that, though, because it's sort of this stranglehold between trying to, go straight and build a life for your own, but this outlaw gunfighter life, the excitement of it all, the sort of tension of it all just brings you straight back. And that's this movie in a nutshell. I've only seen it probably once or twice. I actually watched this one not long ago, probably about 6 or 7 months ago.
Back when we first planned this.
Back when we first planned this, I finally watched it, so I knew this may be coming. I mean, Gary Cooper is quite a powerful sort of actor in these movies, very man's man, and he does well in this film. But it's one of those films that sort of passes you by. Like, watch it once. Am I going to watch Man of the West again anytime soon? Probably not. So it probably doesn't go on this list.
Not very musty. So next is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, 1962. John Ford. That's another common name in this this genre. Somebody had a Sculder quoted him, "When in doubt, make a Western." That's John Ford. John Ford. Quite famously went to World War II and directed or shot a bunch of stuff in World War II. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
James Stewart and John Wayne. Wow.
James Stewart, John Wayne, and Lee Marvin. And I actually just watched this movie again last week because I thought we were doing it last week. So, this is a really great film. And as I said, you're going to keep hearing John Ford. Mm-hmm. His name pops up in a lot of these classic Westerns. And, of course, John Wayne does as well. So this tells a story of a young lawyer, James Stewart, who was a very intelligent man in the East. He comes to the West to sort of build a new life and explore the West. Explore maybe the dangers of it, and at the very start of the film, he gets sort of robbed by the very famous Liberty Valance, played by Lee Marvin, and they sort of had this great sort of showdown together, and sort of he disappears. Then, as I said, James Stewart goes to the town. He sort of wants to start up his like law sort of firm and sort of teach this town like the ways of the East. Mm-hmm. He's educated. This town's all very like into the West, into violence. Everything has to be done by a gun, but he's trying to teach this town like, no, you can do this by words, you can do this by law, and that's what this movie focuses on. And John Wayne kind of plays the old sort of gunfighter. He's the only man that Liberty Valance kind of fears. He has this sort of fear towards him. And yeah, it's just some great chemistry between James Stewart and John Wayne. And Lee Marvin's definitely one of his better westerns in my mind. He's a great villain. Lee Van Cleef actually does. He's the side character. That's why I probably stumbled on that one. And yeah, it's a great film, great powerful western, great story. Not sort of just a lot of action. There's a lot of dialogue in this film, but it has a great message about law and order and the word itself. And yeah, it's a wonderful film, and I definitely put it
It's
in
a
there.
must.
It's a must.
All right, so next is one that I kind of wish I had in my collection and screwed up. But it is McCabe and Mrs. Miller, 1971, from Robert Altman.
Robert Altman. There it is.
There it is.
Criterion.
That's the one I should have gotten instead of Stagecoach.
So Warren Beatty and Julie Christie. Basically, Warren Beatty plays like a gambler, and he wants to set up a gambling business in this sort of small mining town. And Julie Christie plays like a prostitute, and she wants to set up her sort of business as well. And it's kind of the idea about following the American dream, and these two sort of become partners. But eventually what happens is this big sort of powerful corporation tries to take them over and tries to put them down. And this film, it's not a lot of like shootouts, there's not a lot of action to it, there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of like serious moments. It's probably more of a drama, but it has a really good scene at the end in the snow. There's a lot of great scenes in the snow. Very dark sort of film, very bleak. Has a really cool sort of gun fight right near the end, which is great. And yeah, I think it's really well made by Robert Altman. His films are very much like this. So I don't know if this is for everyone, if you're talking about like Westerns Before You Die or even just getting into the genre, but it is a good film. I think it's quite well made, and I really enjoy Warren Beatty in this film. Obviously, he did Bonnie and Clyde and has done a lot of good films. So yeah, I think it's pretty good.
Must.
Would I put it in the list? This is a tough one. I'm sitting on the fence.
Okay.
Probably sitting on the fence
Okay.
for this one, actually. I can't say yes or no for that one.
Well, you had me at prostitutes and card players, so...
Yeah, gamblers and prostitutes. There you go.
Next on the list is My Darling Clementine, 1946. Once again, John Ford.
And once again, Criterion. There you go. So this stars the very famous Henry Fonda, and this again is like the original Tombstone because it focuses on Wyatt Earp, played by Henry Fonda, his brothers, and going to Tombstone, the gunfight at Elko Corral. Walter Brennan's in this as well. He plays the main villain, and Walter Brennan is in a lot of westerns with John Wayne later on. So yeah, it's pretty much, if you've seen Tombstone, it's very similar, although he has 4 brothers in this instead of the 2 others. So he's got Virgil and Morg, and then there's also a smaller brother called James. And basically what happens in this film, his brother gets killed because the other 3 brothers like go away to the town to do some business. They come back, find all their cattle has been stolen. James has been killed, and so they go after revenge, and they end up going against the Clayton gang and the Cowboys, and focuses on that. And obviously Doc Holliday's in here, played by Victor Mature, and again they form that partnership. So as I said, this story of Wyatt Earp has been told many times, and this is probably the classic telling of this story. It really is. Henry Fonda's great. He's probably at his peak at this point, and John Ford he just knows how to make these sort of really feel-good westerns and just has everything down pat. You know what I mean? So I probably would recommend you checking this out at some point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Criterion gets a little heavy on their directors. A lot of what is it? John Ford. There's a lot of Hitchcock. A lot of there's somebody Kurosawa, Wes Anderson. I'm forgetting what's his face. Linklater. Seems like everything Linklater makes, they got to get their hands on. So it is.
Yeah,
it is a must.
Great film. Yep, it is a must for me. I love John Ford, man.
Next is 1953's Naked Spur.
This one I actually haven't
Woo!
seen. I can't. Yeah, there's the first
Hey,
one.
me too. we got to N.
I know it's with James Stewart and Robert Ryan, and I think it's directed by Anthony Mann, but I haven't got around to it because, as I said, I'm not the biggest James Stewart fan in these westerns. I think he's too nice. I don't know.
No.
He hasn't got that sort of grunt like John Wayne or a Gary Cooper or Clint Eastwood. So yeah,
He's even a bit nice for Hitchcock movies. Vertigo. I
he
wish somebody else was in Vertigo.
Exactly. So yeah, I probably will watch it at some point, but yeah, never got around to it.
Next, 1955's Oklahoma.
And I haven't seen that
Good
either.
for you.
It's a musical.
Yeah. That's more a musical than a Western.
It's a musical, and I'm not really big into that genre, so yeah, it's probably not going to be one that I watch anytime soon.
Next, this one I have on deck. It's my uncle's got it for me. Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968.
And I got the Steelbook.
Steelbook. Sergio Leone.
So the fourth Western by Sergio Leone, and just watched this actually on the stream last weekend. And yeah, this is what I consider a Western opera, because that's basically what it is. It brings all the elements to the good, bad, and the ugly, and it kind of heightens it in a way. It's probably more of a story, more sort of heartfelt, the good, bad, and the ugly. It sort of follows four characters. Claudia Canelli, who is a prostitute and becomes a widow very quickly in the film because her husband-to-be gets gunned down, and all the family as well. You've got Henry Fonda, who plays this villainous role, a very cold role, and very different because Henry Fonda always played the good guy. So when people first saw this in the cinema, they were totally shocked because that first scene when you see Henry Fonda kill some kids in the film, spoiler. If everyone.
Spoiler for a 60-year-old movie.
I know, it's the opening 10 minutes, and just they shoot to his face, and you just see this dark, cold Henry Fonda with the blue eyes, and you're like, wow, Henry Fonda can play a bad guy. So that's that. And you got Jason Robards, who kind of plays an aging gunfighter. He's kind of had enough of it all, and he's just trying to get along with, but he gets pinned on the murder because he's a sort of infamous outlaw. And then you got the very quiet Charles Bronson, who plays harmonica. And Clint Eastwood was actually supposed to play this role, but he kind of got sick of doing these spaghetti westerns because he just did the trilogy. So he kind of wanted to do other things. So Charles Bronson's great. You know, the opening scene, I think you might have watched this at the beginning, where there's about 10 minutes of no dialogue at all. It's just all the sounds of the train station, the sounds of the fly, and then you see Henry Fonda. The bag comes out of the train, and you hear the harmonica, and it's Henry Fonda facing these three gunfighters, and not Henry Fonda, Charles Bronson facing these gunfighters, and yeah, it's just, he's really good in it, and you know, he has a story behind it all and why he wants to track down Henry Fonda, and you don't find that out to the end. So it's just, the cinematography of this film is great. The music, again, Ennio Morricone does it again with that, and yeah, it's just a really nice story of sort of the dying of the West and sort of this new life that's going to come forward for all these characters. So yeah, great film, and definitely in this list, and highly recommend it to all who have not watched it.
I got it. I'll get to it. So next is The Outlaw Josie Wales, 1976. Visual aids.
Did you?
Oh, look at that. I think that's the same image that I have. Yeah, it's the same image.
There it is. So, yeah, I think this was the second Clint Eastwood Western that he did. And this one follows a guy, he's just a simple rancher, and these blue coats, I think because this is actually set during the Civil War, these blue coats rape his wife, kill his son right at the beginning, and what does Clint Eastwood do? He becomes a badass and wants that vengeance on them. So at the beginning, he kind of joins this sort of ragtag team of like outsiders, and I think they're following the South. They're part of the South in the Civil War. They all got gunned down, and he's the last one left. And the blue coats, they're trying to follow him the whole way. They're trying to track him down, and he ends up like these bounty hunters come after him, and he kind of like meets Indian Dan George, who's in a lot of westerns. He was in Little Big Man, probably one of the only good things about that film. So yeah, it's a great film, Clint Eastwood. It might be overly long for some people. Sandra Locke's also in here. She plays like the love interest. That actually was his wife for a time during this period. So it has a lot of cool like gun shoots, gunfights, and just the cinematography is really good as well. So I really love Josie Wales. It just has like dark, edgy that you need in westerns, a lot of tension, and just violence, and that's what I like for westerns.
This was directed by Clint Eastwood too, right? All right, so
Yep,
I'm noticing a pattern now with the Clint Eastwood directed ones, which High Plains Drifter, now Outlaw Josie Wales, and Unforgiven, which I've seen. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
the R word comes up every single time in a Clint Eastwood movie. Rape and then vengeance. Is that like a theme with him? What is he?
Yeah, he seems to do that a lot.
Okay.
Because as I said, it happens a couple of times in this movie. Would you believe?
In the movie.
Right from the beginning. Clint Eastwood sort of got away from that sort of niceties in westerns, like all the clean. Like if you see like Gary Cooper and the John Wayne westerns, they're all like clean shaven, all very nicey nice in a way. These westerns are more gritty, more violent. I think Clint Eastwood took what he learned from Sergio Leone, because obviously those spaghetti westerns are very dirty, gritty, and he made that in his own westerns. And you see it's probably more realistic in a way, because that's how the West was in the Civil War. It wasn't a clean thing. It was dirty, it was violent, people getting killed, raped, and all that type of thing. So
looking like a hippie.
I think that's what, exactly, that's what Clint Eastwood was trying to do in a lot of his westerns, and it worked because it's engaging. And I think that's why a lot of Clint Eastwood's westerns don't age badly. Like some of these earlier films might not, they kind of age more so, because watching it now, it's kind of like, these are a little bit corny. These westerns sort of have a never-ending life. They just keep going on and on, and you love them every time you watch them. So this is definitely in the list, no doubt about that.
Okay, that's a must. The next is 1942's Oxbow incident. Am I saying that right? Oxbow?
Yeah, the Oxbow incident. Yeah, Oxbow. It's, again, this film is actually brought out by Arrow Academy. I actually don't own this one because it's not one that I could probably revisit that much. It again stars Henry Fonda, and him and his partner come into this town. This town's full of like cow rustlers, and they get involved with this posse who are after a bunch of fugitives. And it's kind of, in a way, like, have you seen 12 Angry Men?
I have. I've seen both versions.
Yeah,
of it,
this is kind of like your court sort of room drama, but not set in a courtroom, if you know what I mean. So it's kind of, it deals with like what's right and wrong in the law, because they end up tracking down these guys, but are these the right fugitives that they were looking for from the beginning? But they're so like rolled up by rage and just wanting to get this done that they might have come across the wrong people, if you know what I mean. So Henry Fonda and his partner got to balance like justice and like, is this right? Should we be following this posse, or like what's going on here? And it sort of just dwells on that. It's not probably that like entertaining, not a lot of action at all. It's just very like drama driven. And as I said, if you enjoy like 12 Angry Men, Kill a Mockingbird, you're probably going to enjoy this one, but I probably wouldn't put it in the list. No.
Okay. All right, next, the title's a little racist if you ask me, but 1948's The Pale Face.
I haven't seen that one.
Okay. Well, like, what's that, the third one so far? Not a very long list of what you haven't seen. All right, so right along, 1973's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid.
Yes, I love this one. And this has actually not got a Blu-ray, unfortunately.
Oh,
I wish it would.
DVD. Ugh.
Yep, DVD, guys. So still got my retro DVDs. And this is actually, as you said, directed by Sam Peckinpah, who did a lot of westerns as well. And this is probably one of his better ones, starring James Coburn and Chris Christopherson. And this focuses on a very real western tale about Billy the Kid and Pat Garrett, and the sort of the bond they had, and sort of the duel they had as well, because Pat Garrett is like a lawman and the sheriff. Billy the Kid is outlaw, and they sort of had this uneasy alliance for a time, but then Pat Garrett has to lay down the law on him and has to come after him. And this is what basically this movie focuses on. It's got a great soundtrack. Bob Dylan actually does some of the tunes in here, and James Coburn's really good as Pat Garrett. Chris Christopherson equally good as Billy the Kid. And as I said, a bit like the Wyatt Earp story, this kind of tale has been told many times. Paul Newman did Left-Handed Gun. That was all about Billy the Kid. More recently, there was a film that came out, I think last year, with Dane DeHaan and Ethan Hawke called The Kid, and that was kind of focusing on Billy the Kid as well. So it has been done a few times. This is one of the better tellings of that tale. A lot of great gunfights in here, great cinematography, and just a really nice story between, they're friends, but he has to uphold the law. So it's always that sort of battle going on between the whole film. And it's a great film. And I remember recommending this one to Trini and a few other guys, and they really enjoyed it. And even for you, I think you would like
really,
because this is your 70s. This is in your 70s type western, so I know you get scared off by the black and white earlier ones. So this one I think you could enjoy. Obviously Sam Peckinpah focused more on the violence and all that. So yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I like grown up stuff too, so it is a must, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so next is 1948's Red River.
Ooh, gotta love this. Nice set here. So there we go. This is actually directed by another famous director that John Wayne worked with, Howard Hawks. They did a lot of westerns together, and as I said, this is a classic. It's sort of set after the Civil War. John Wayne and the very young Montgomery Clift sort of team up together along with Walter Brennan, and they go on this sort of cattle drive. And so for many years and months they're on this drive. They have to take all these cattle down to like Texas to get paid, because after the Civil War, of course, they've got no money. So trying to do that, and along the way, tension kind of builds between John Wayne and Montgomery Clift, and John Wayne kind of becomes the villain in the second half of the film, which you don't see too often, and sort of rooting for Montgomery Clift because they kind of sort of in the middle have this great sort of argument, and sort of tension builds, and they kind of leave John Wayne. They're like, we've got to do this without him, and sort of that happens, and then along the sort of third act, John Wayne comes after them and sort of says, look, what are you doing? This is my cattle. So yeah, it has that sort of tension going. And Howard Hawks is a great Western director. He really is. He's got it all, black and white.
That Blu-ray looks ginormous. Yeah. What is in that set?
Yeah, this is actually a set. It's got like a book in it as well. It's all about the film. And it's got like a novel called Blazing Guns on the Chisholm Trail. Probably all about the cattle drives, because that was a big thing in the Westerns. And that's another thing you'll see a lot in Westerns. A lot they focus on cattle drives and these cow punchers trying to make money, going to Texas and things like that. So yeah, John Wayne, Montgomery Clift, really good one. And again, I'd probably put it in the list as well, just because it's got everything you want in a Western, in my opinion.
You look at that, you ask why Criterion is the class of the collector community.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, if you love this movie, guys, yeah, get the Criterion. Simple as that.
Next is 1959's Ride Lonesome.
Don't have that movie on me. It's up there somewhere because it's in a box set and it's hard to reach. It's actually Randolph Scott Western. Again, not a lot to say about this one. It's quite simple. He plays like a bounty hunter after a killer, and just sort of the tension builds from there. It's very simple. I've only seen it once. Randolph Scott was probably another guy, a bit like we've been talking already, Gary Cooper, John Wayne, who was one of those powerful Western actors. Lee Van Cleef again makes a appearance in this film, so he did a lot of these smaller roles before he did all the spaghetti westerns. And yeah, it's okay. As I said, part of the Bud Boshia set, for those who have got that indicator set, there's about 5 or 6 movies in there, and it's probably just a regular film, you know, a 6 to 6.5 out of 10. There's nothing that exciting or memorable about it. It's got a couple of nice gunfights at the end, but yeah, I probably wouldn't put it
on the must list, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, another one from 1959, Rio Bravo.
Oh, there we go. I knew you were getting to the good one. There it is, guys.
Oh, we lost you.
Oh,
no.
Yeah, am I back?
Yeah. Hold on. You're back. Go ahead, talk. I just have to control your thingy here.
Okay, there it is, guys. So Rio Bravo, directed by Howard Hawks. Probably his very best Western. This is probably one of the best John Wayne Westerns of all time. Really love this one a lot. It's actually starring Dean Martin as well, Ricky Nelson and Angie Dickinson, Walter Brennan as well. And this is basically John Carpenter used some of this for actually Assault on Precinct 13. And it's so good. It has all the elements you want in a Western. It's got the gunfights. It's got the little romantic interest in there. John Wayne, he's like a desperate sheriff. He's up against these powerful cattle baron and these hired gunfighters. And all he's got is a drunken sort of sheriff, drunken deputy sheriff and Dean Martin, and a guy can barely walk and Stumpy, Walter Brennan, and obviously this rash gunfighter and Ricky Nelson. So yeah, it's just a battle between that. It takes place a lot in just a jail setting, so almost in one setting for half of the film, and yeah, it's so iconic. I'd be surprised I'm surprised you haven't seen this one, really. You really should. It's a classic.
That's a must then, obviously.
It's a must, yeah.
All right, so next we're sticking in the Rios. Rio Grande from 19 1950.
Yep, got that one somewhere. Where is it? Here it is. There it is. So this is actually John Ford again, part of the Cavalry trilogy. They did 3 of them, Fort Apache, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and Rio Grande. Not really sure why this one made the list, because it's okay. It's just basically John Wayne plays an old sort of sergeant in the cavalry, and his son starts to enter into it, and he's sort of worried that is his son gonna like be up for this type of thing. His wife's Maureen O'Hara. I wasn't a huge fan of the Cavalry trilogy. Really, all of them were kind of draggy and just not that interesting. I mean, John Ford has, he's got the cinematography in there, but very dialogue driven, not that interesting. You got your cowboy Indian fight towards the end, but it's just sort of middle of the road, nothing that exciting, you know.
So that's a no then.
It's
a no from me, dog. Next is 1956's The Searchers.
Ooh, let's see now. I should have that somewhere. Yep. Classic film. There it is. John Wayne in probably his best acted role of all time. John Ford again, probably his best movie. This movie, as I said, again, sets place after the Civil War. John Wayne comes back to his family, his brother and all the nieces and nephews. And basically what happens within the first act, the family get killed by a rag team of Comanches or Apaches, and they take two of the little nieces, and the film focuses on John Wayne and Jeffrey Hunter, who's kind of like his second nephew or whatever, and they spend years and years tracking down this Apache company to find his niece, and that's basically what it focuses on. The niece is played by Natalie Wood, who was quite a famous actress back in the day, and
Afraid of Boats.
Yeah, it's just really good because John Wayne, it's not the nice John Wayne. He's quite a racist in this film, and he might have been that in real life, very political, but he's very like gung-ho. He's like, he has that anger in his face and just very tense all the way, and like he's stopping at nothing to find his niece. And then when he finds his niece to sort of infiltrated into the Indian, she's become like Indian herself because she's grown up in that lifestyle. He kind of has to like determine what I'm going to do. He kind of questions his own values. So yeah, and obviously being with his I think it's either his nephew or something. Jeffrey Hunter, I think, plays his second nephew, something like that. But again, really grand, sort of, again, one of those Western operas, I like to say, just because it has the great landscapes, the music, and just that real feel of the West. So, yeah, I love The Searchers, and another one I highly recommend.
Yeah, so it's a must then?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so to those of you in the chat, we have 6 more that are in the book. Then Jase will be able to take a breather, and then we'll kind of open it up. And then Jase will talk about his list. But 6 more that are in the book, and then we can kind of... I see you guys getting a little antsy in the chat. We'll get to you. So next is 1953's Shane.
Oh, a lot of memories. Do I have Shane close by, or did I put it down? Oh no, here it is. There it is, Shane, Alan Ladd, directed by George Stevens. And to be honest, this is probably very nostalgic for me because this is one of the first Westerns I ever saw as a boy. So I probably watched this when I was 6 or 7, so a very young Jase back in the day. Watched this movie, and yeah, it gets me very emotional in a lot of ways because, growing up and having all these experiences of this film, it kind of has like I think Clint Eastwood took a lot out of this film because Shane, Alan Ladd, comes to these farmers. He's kind of like a mysterious gunfighter. You have no sort of background on him. He comes out to help them out, and then there's this cattle baron that's against all these ranchers, and he wants to take over their land, and sort of they have that battle going on, and Shane kind of helps the farmers and just to stick together, and he's the gunfighter. So very similar to Pale Rider, which Clint Eastwood did later on. And I just love it. I mean, it's got the boy, like a lot of people think he's annoying, Brandon DeWild. I love you, Shane, very iconic at the end, and figure out there. And it's got the very iconic Jack Palance, who one of his first earlier roles as the villain gunfighter who comes into the town to sort of wreak havoc a little bit, and then goes up against Shane at the end duel. So yeah, I love Shane a lot of great memories of it, and I guess you could say it's one of the movies that got me into the genre.
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
was always got to appreciate it, and yeah, definitely in the list.
Okay. Next is Silverlode from 1954.
Can't comment.
Oh wow, was that the third or fourth one?
Fourth one, I think.
So here's the.
Well, who's in Silverlode? Oh, you don't.
I don't have it. I have 1954.
Okay. Never heard of it, so probably not. Well, I don't know.
So this one I have, but have not seen yet. It's 1939's Stagecoach.
I don't really get into that. There we go. John Ford again.
That is in this building.
So
I have
that's
no
Eddie's
urge to
house
watch
right now, and he still hasn't watched it. So, yeah, this again is a classic Western. Pretty much kicked off the genre, I think, as I said, 1939. And this basically was one of the first movies of John Wayne. I mean, he did a lot of like TV movies before that, but this is one of the first iconic roles for him as Ringo Kid. And basically, it's just this group of people from all different backgrounds go on this journey on this stagecoach. And the stagecoach kind of plays like the character in itself. And they come across John Wayne, who's a gunfighter, and he kind of, deals with all the people on the stagecoach, gets a love interest in there as a little bit. And, obviously the stagecoach eventually gets attacked by Indians, so it has that cowboy Indian thing going for it. So it's just a very vanilla type of Western, very original. You knew a lot of films are going to be inspired by this later on. So it's but it's got a lot of great dialogue. Even I think Tarantino probably took a lot from this with his scenes in the stagecoach in Hateful Eight. Because so I think he got some inspiration from
intrigued.
it. So John Ford is a great director. Love John Wayne in this. As I said, he's even just very vanilla in this. He's just working his way into these westerns, and I think it's great, and it's really nice Criterion edition, of course. Great quality, no surprise, and highly recommend Stagecoach. So sit down later maybe and watch.
Is it a must?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. For westerns, yeah.
Okay, so next, 1992's Unforgiven, directed by Clint Eastwood.
And you can finally say something.
Which features rape. Clint Eastwood directed a film, and it's got rape and revenge and all that jazz. Is that a steelbook? Oh.
Yeah. There we go.
So with my limited knowledge of the genre, go ahead, take a breather, Jase.
Tell me something.
It felt a little dark. One thing that I feel like the genre hasn't held back from is being gritty and realistic. And considering it came out in 1992, maybe you could tell me more than I know. Somebody like Morgan Freeman. I don't know the exact time. But usually...
That's right, we were talking about this, yes. I don't think Clint Eastwood kind of focused on the historical accuracies, you know what I mean? He just, because basically it's about two, retired outlaws in a way, going on this last job, and because Clint Eastwood now got a family, and he obviously had a young wife who died of tuberculosis or an illness, and he's trying to feed his two kids. Morgan Freeman's kind of the same. He's got this young Indian wife, and he's, probably hasn't got a lot of money, just a simple farmer. So they do this one last job with this young, brash gunfighter who, he talks big. He's like, so I've killed this many people, but in reality, he's as blind as a bat, and he knows nothing about killing. And he's trying to draw inspiration from Clint Eastwood. And then you got the sheriff of the town, Wild Bill, played by Gene Hackman, very rough and tough and
hot shot,
holds authority. Yeah, hot shot. He's building like a house, but they're making fun of him, remember, because he's building it the wrong way. The tiles are not coming out. And then you got a very nice cameo, a couple of good scenes with Richard Harris, who plays like a bounty hunter who comes there because the prostitutes at the beginning, one of them gets their face cut up, and so they all put their money together to put out this sort of bounty on the two cowboys that did it. So obviously Richard Harris comes into town for that, and he soon gets shown the way out by Gene Hackman. So so it's a great film. It's Clint Eastwood's last Western. He hasn't done any more since then. It might be his last. It's really nice telling. It's violent as always, but I still think Clint Eastwood always has that little emotional attachment to his films. Like there's something there that you hold on to even at the end. And I don't know, you just really want Clint Eastwood to succeed, especially towards the end. Spoiler, when they kill Morgan Freeman and he comes back into the bar, that really scene with his shotgun. And he's like, I'm here to kill you, Wild Bill. It's great. So
Yeah.
probably one of the better westerns in the last 20 years for sure.
Yeah, it's just strange. Like
20, 30 years now.
The dialogue, they don't shy away from stuff, and certainly. But when it came to Morgan, again, I don't know the time and the era, and I'm not well educated on the West and how they took to Morgan Freeman's kind. But they're certainly racist with their dialogue with beaners, as they call them in the movie, the Mexicans. So I don't think Morgan Freeman's character would have been treated so nonchalantly, but again, that is my lack of education. So I enjoyed the movie. It was just a little dark. I think I prefer stuff like the stuff from the '60s that has a little bit of camp to it at the very least.
Clint Eastwood films, you're probably going to find that with all the others too, like we've talked about already, High Plains Drifter, Outlaw Josie Wales, they've all got that edgy darkness to it. Like there's nothing too bright, which, I mean, I guess that kind of was the West. I mean, from what I've studied and looked at, I mean, I wasn't there, so I wouldn't know, but I think that's more realistic more than the campiness, you know. But yeah, I kind of like a blend, as I've talked about through this already.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, is it a must?
Yeah.
Okay. Next is 1969's The Wild Bunch.
Oh, and do I have that close by? Yep, I do. One of the better ones. I think a lot of people remember when we planned it last week, and it didn't happen last week. A lot of people were talking about this movie in the chat. Directed by Sam Peckinpah, who, as I said, has done a lot of great westerns. This stars William Holden, Ernest Borgnine, Robert Ryan, and Warren Oates, and it's all about, again, these aging gunfighters who are actually criminals. They're robbers. They go on this last heist, and it's sort of the dying of the West in a way, because these guys they're aging, they can't fit into this new world. So, you know, it's a story about that, and it's quite relatable in a way. I've talked this a few times to a few people, and it's like someone like me who really loves westerns, and I'm one of the only ones in a lot of groups that really big into westerns. And it's sort of like over time, the 70s, 80s, 90s, even now, the Western genre is kind of dying. So I'm almost like these gunfighters in a way, you know what I mean? Like, I'm the last one, like, standing kind of thing as far as loving the genre, trying to educate you guys like today, and like just bringing the Western genre back into people who may be intimidated or just like haven't got the feel for it. So that's kind of what the Wild Bunch is all about. It's just these gunfighters trying to enter this new world and unsure of themselves, and can they survive in this new world? Maybe, maybe not. And it's just wonderfully acted by William Holden, Ernest Borgnine. It's a classic Western. The whole third act, the big sort of gun fights at the end, and the whole with the Mexican army is so good. And this one for sure, I'd recommend to you. Like, I think you get something out of this one.
And it's a must.
It's a must. Yep.
Okay, and last on the list is Winchester 73 from 1950.
And James Stewart, Anthony Mann. So again, as I said, I've only seen this movie once because I've talked about it already. James Stewart in westerns, too much of a nice guy for me. I just don't see it a lot. So Shelley Winters as well is in this one, and it sort of follows the story of, firstly, James Stewart's like a bounty hunter or whatever. He's after like an outlaw who killed his father, and sort of they end up having this sort of rifle competition, and the winner of the rifle competition gets to keep the Winchester 73. So it starts off like that, and then it kind of passes through this Winchester 73 rifle, kind of becomes a symbol and goes through different characters and has an impact on different people's lives. So it almost goes through the whole retelling of the West in a way. So it's okay. I mean, as I said, James Stewart, I can't totally get into him. So every time I see him in these westerns, I just don't totally involve myself in them as much. And yeah, I just probably this one not for me. I think he's done better ones, so I probably wouldn't put that in this list.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a no, which brings a total to 18 that Jase has as must see, which is about half of what the book has. But Jase does have another list of films,
Yep.
which he could take. Go ahead, take your break and drink, sir. We'll open it up to the chat. I know Tony Movie 9 has been asking this a couple times. What is the worst Western of all time? And you're humble.
Well, if Blazing Saddles was in
No,
if that's considered a West, it could
Ridiculous
be.
Six is in the.
Yeah, Ridiculous Six is bad. Like the Wild Wild West.
Oh!
Will Smith.
Oh, does that count?
That's horrible. Kind of Jonah Hex. I think with who was that? Megan Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was terrible. There's some of those like spaghetti westerns. The Return to Sabata was really bad. Wasn't a fan of that one. I think I talked about Little Big Man's got to be in there for me, even though it's in the book. I just don't like that movie at all. That's probably it. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I've probably put a few on the list. Trying to think of other ones. Silverado is okay, but near the bottom.
Yeah.
So
Ridiculous.
One of those, even like Million Dice to Die in the West when they
yeah.
West. Yeah,
That's just a bad movie outright. I don't even know.
Exactly.
So they're asking about Django Unchained, which I'm kind of curious about too, because I quite enjoy that movie. Although I don't know if I would consider that a Western.
Yeah, I might check my phone so I can actually see the chat myself.
Yeah. There is no Django Unchained. 2012 is quite underrepresented, actually. They go from The Artist in 2011 right to Gravity in 2013. Interesting.
Yeah, well, as I said, Django, like Tarantino was so big into spaghetti western, so like he took a lot of inspiration for like The Good, Bad, and the Ugly and all the like Sergio Corbucci spaghetti westerns when he made Django, and of course Django by Franco Nero is very iconic, so that's pretty much where he took that from.
No Country for Old Men. No, but I don't know if I would count that.
It's kind of a modern western. Like there's a few westerns, even like I've talked about this before. No Country for Old Men, Hell or High Water. It kind of has that sort of, original western element to it. Like they're obviously bank robbers. Instead of like riding with horses, they're riding vehicles in that particular film, Hell or High Water. So it kind of does, yeah. And same with No Country for Old Men. It kind of set in the modern sort of West.
Yeah.
So I guess you could call them modern westerns.
Dalton says Assassination of Jesse James should be on there. It was on the 2011 version I had. So it's been demoted. Assassination of Jesse James was in the book in 2011. It's not now.
It's a slow one. It's definitely a slow one. So yeah.
Yeah. So they're saying didn't have True Grit or Magnificent Seven either. Well, funny you said Magnificent Seven. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a bit.
Wind River. Oh, that's recent too, right? That just came out a year or two ago.
Yeah, Wind River again. That was same writer as Hell or High Water. So Wind River, kind of again. I think Sandra said no Tombstone. We'll get into that in a minute too.
Yeah, my small education, I quite enjoyed Tombstone.
Yeah, you're about to talk about it. Roger says, would you consider the movies Hateful Eight? Or did you read that already?
Oh no, Hateful Eight.
Okay, would you consider the movies Hateful Eight? Oh, of course, definitely. The Proposition is actually an Australian Western. It's really good, set in the old Australian outback. So it is definitely great. And Hateful Eight, of course. I mean, it's very much like the spaghetti western Great Silence. It's taken a lot from that.
Yeah, and again, I checked for you guys. Hateful Eight is not in the book, like period. So it's not like they skipped it on the genre. They're just no love for QT.
Strange, isn't it?
What about The Mandalorian? That's a television series, and that's still going. Space Western. Yeah, that's another. I mean, I told Jase this last night that since I've been watching it, I've got a very Western vibe to it. I don't know if you've been watching, Jase, but
Yeah, I have. I've actually watched the second. I've watched 2 episodes, and yeah, definitely like a space western. Has that? It reminded me of the first couple of episodes. Reminded me of Clint Eastwood in the For a Few Dollars More, and for Fistful of Dollars when he's walking into the towns and he's got a bounty hunter kind of feel, because that's what Mandalorian really is. He's a bounty hunter. So definitely western.
No, Paul. Hateful Lady's not in the book.
Yeah, it's Believe in the Hype says, what about The Revenant? Again, it's almost sort of a survival type western. You could almost put that in there as well.
What was that, 16, 15? Revenant?
Revenant was 15, and because a movie with Robert Redford called Jeremiah Johnson is very much like The Revenant, and that is a great kind of western too. So check that out if you haven't.
Yeah, 2015 is. Listen, Star Wars The Force Awakens is a film from 2015 in this book. Tangerine, 2015 in the book. Mad Max Fury Road, 2015 in the book. That is 2015 for you in this book. 3 films, and one of them is Star Wars.
Yeah, I don't understand Hateful Eight. I guess Hateful Eight just didn't get a lot of like if you talk about like Tarantino's like filmography, it didn't really hit the mark like some of the others. Not in my opinion it did. I loved it because obviously I love westerns and love how it's pretty much set in one little location. I think it's great.
I think he, with the script and everything, he, Tarantino's kind of sucking himself off a little bit with how that movie plays out.
Just so much inspiration from other westerns though. As I said to you when we were talking about Stagecoach, the earliest scenes when Kurt Russell and Samuel Jackson are in the Stagecoach, and then like he's taking a lot of spaghetti westerns, even like McCabe and Mrs. Miller's in there as well. So yeah, that's what Tarantino does.
Guys, I'll check. I might be missing a page, but no, The Hateful Eight is not in the book. I'm
Damn, we're getting a lot of Hateful Eight love, right? Yeah.
Write a letter to Stephen J. Schneider. So that's the person you want to
scroll up a bit more because I didn't see some of these other comments.
And Revenant won awards.
I've been so fixed on talking.
Yeah. So the other thing, guys, what I've noticed in these books, especially going from 2011 to now 20, I guess this is technically the 2018 book. They go a little heavy on the year before. Like I guarantee you in 3 years that A Star Is Born will not be in the book. Like Moonlight is in the book too. Like there's just a bunch of they get a little heavy on the new releases just for the sake of saying, hey, look, these are movies that are out right now that you must see. And then, 2015 has 3 movies that just,
Sandra earlier, I think must have been when we were talking before, she talked about The Shooters, which was actually John Wayne's last movie, more of a drama, but quite an emotional one. It's a shame that wasn't in there because that is a good one. It's got the old James Stewart there as well. And pretty much John Wayne was dying in real life as well as in the movie, so very relatable to that. And that's a good one. I think that was Don Siegel in the early to mid 70s. So Shooters is a good one. No Blu-ray for that, unfortunately. What else are people talking about? Tombstone. What else we got? A lot of people talking about Tombstone. Yeah, seems to be a favorite. James Hester earlier said favorite Western, The Wild Bunch, which we just talked about. Very nice. I agree. It's probably top 20.
Wow. Okay.
Sundance took the stream. Trini. Who stole my? Oh, okay. Who stole my Stagecoach? Right, and then the chat's still buzzing.
Okay.
Cool.
So if you're ready to take the stage, Jase, and discuss what is not in the book, but Jase certainly recommends at the very least.
Yep.
So the first one I have here, or whatever order you want to go in. I mean.
I've got my file here, so I might just, there might be things that you might not have written down.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. First one I've got here, you've actually seen.
Yay!
So I think you've seen. So there we go.
Yeah, I have seen it. Yes.
The remake, because obviously they did the original, came out in the 30s or 40s. It's a Criterion, but yeah, this one came out in 2007. Russell Crowe, Christian Bale, great Western, probably one of my favorite modern Westerns of all time. Obviously, modern Westerns as far as the last 20 years or so. Got a really memorable Ben Foster in there as well as Charlie Prince.
Oh, that's right.
One of my favorite gunfighters. I love him in there. One of my favorite scenes is like, "You guys aren't a posse, aren't you? I hate posses." So he's just such a cruel like bastard in there. He really is. I love it. And Russell Crowe really good in this, and Christian Bale obviously. Russell Crowe plays like the very famous outlaw Ben Wade. Christian Bale just plays a very simple rancher, and he has to, he's trying to get money for his family, so he takes on this job about putting Russell Crowe to this train to Yuma. Yuma prison's like a big. Yuma prison came up in a lot of westerns, just this big jail for all the outlaws, and it's directed by James Mangold, who's done a lot of good movies. Walk the Line was a really good film, and I love this film. I've watched it so many times. Cameo Peter Fonda's also in this as well as the Pilkington bounty hunter, and I love it. So what are your thoughts?
I agree. It's been a while since I've seen it. I own it. That should say a lot. Shouldn't say anything, even though I have Stagecoach.
I think it's probably one like if you're getting into the genre, people get a bit scared of the older sort of cornier, like black and white ones. Maybe start somewhere here and maybe that's sort of get your feel of the Western, find your feet a little bit, and go from there.
Yeah, of the modern stuff. I'm trying to think. 21st century, could it be one of, if not the best Western in the 21st century?
Well, from when I was born, 1990, it probably basically is. I mean, we've talked about Unforgiven, probably up there. Probably we're going to mention Tombstone pretty soon.
That's the 90s.
I think this is one of them as well.
Yeah, no,
because Tombstone was 93, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I don't have much knowledge, but I didn't want to waste time watching something that I've already seen. So it's been a while since I've seen 310 Yuma, but I own it. I enjoyed it enough to buy it. I agree.
I mean, the original is good too. Don't get me wrong, I got the Criterion, but it's a little bit, that one more slower and definitely more if you're into the genre itself, because it's it's not as fast paced as this movie. This movie is quite, from the beginning to end, there's so much going on, so I'd probably recommend watching this one before the original. Yeah,
and it's over 2 hours, Stuart. They stack up a bunch of shit in that movie.
Yeah, it's just so many great actors in this as well. That's why I like it, and just the whole end scene where he's trying to get him on the train, and then his men are all shooting at him, and he's running with him in that little town, and I like that a lot. So, I might watch this again this week. I'm talking about it, so I'm just into it again. I might watch it again.
All right, what else you got?
Okay, so let's go. Did I move again?
No, you're good.
Okay, another one by Kino Lorber, and I just watched this one recently, The Big Country, with Gregory Peck. In the Kino cell, I think, people, because I don't know if that's still going on. Charlton Heston. It's about just family of like ranchers and all that type of thing. Gene Simmons is here as well, and it's just very iconic. And again, that word, Western opera, I've mentioned it a couple of times with Once Upon a Time in the West and The Searchers. Very iconic landscapes, all of it in there, and that's what The Big Country really is. Great sort of battle between him and Charlton Heston in this. Gregory Peck's a very famous actor, and he kind of did a few westerns as well. You can kind of put him in the same sort of wavelength as like the John Waynes, the Gary Coopers, and those sort of guys. So I like this one a lot. As I said, just watched it very recently because I got it in the previous Kino sale, and I know Trini in there and some of the other guys like it. So I would put it in that 1001 list.
Wow, okay.
Now this one, I'm not really sure I'd put it in here. I just kind of took it off the shelf for more of like nostalgic purposes. It's a James Stewart Western. It's one I actually do like, Broken Arrow. And when I was talking about Shane, like earlier, about my nostalgia and growing up with the genre, this is another film that I saw really early on. So I guess it might have set the scene for my love for Westerns. It's quite a simple story about a young sort of gunfighter, James Stewart. He kind of incorporates into the Indian lifestyle. He becomes like friends with them, and then surrounding it is like the Civil War going on, and like this fight between the Indians and the cowboys and all that. So it's a nice story. I really like it, and I think it's definitely one of James Stewart's better westerns. So I've seen this multiple times. So yeah, a lot of memories with it growing up, and yeah, it's just a nice little western. So maybe an easy watch type film. I don't know. So there it is, Broken Arrow.
Okie dokie. That's not even on my list here. Okay.
That's okay. Sorry, I know
It's fine.
I've got
It's
different
fine.
things coming up, but yeah. Next one, I know Trini likes this one a lot. Big fan of spaghetti westerns, maybe even more so than the original westerns. This is the Big Gun Down, Lee Van Cleef and Thomas Millian. This is probably one of the better spaghetti westerns of all time. This is a Grindhouse releasing. It's got all the ultimate stuff on there, and it's just such a great film. It's just about Lee Van Cleef's a bounty hunter. He's on this trail of this Mexican sort of criminal, and that's how it is. That's the whole film. He's just tracking down this guy. They have all these different duels. One gets one up on each other, then the next guy does that, and that's what happens. And it's very similar to some of the earlier like spaghetti westerns like Django, and even some of the Dollar Trilogy elements are in this as well. Lee Van Cleef became quite a big star in this genre after doing like For a Few Dollars More and The Good, Bad and the Ugly. So he actually stayed on in Italy and Spain to film more of these movies and became quite a star. So probably one of his better ones. And Thomas Millian here, I think is he Italian or Mexican actor, one of the two. He's very famous in spaghetti westerns, very big name. So how we were talking earlier about like Gary Cooper, John Wayne, he's the man for spaghetti westerns. So you'll probably see him in a lot if you watch those type of movies. Next one, again, pretty much the same vein, spaghetti western, Arrow release, Lee Van Cleef, Day of Anger. And I know Tarantino took a lot of inspiration from this one when he did Django, and he's taken the soundtrack from this. Again, I think this is the Ennio Morricone soundtrack, and great film again, just more of the same, spaghetti western, gunfights, close shots of the eyes, the iconic music, all of that in there, a lot of fun, a lot of excitement, and Lee Van Cleef being a badass. So yeah, can't say much more, but I really enjoy it. That's Day of Anger. You should probably watch this one. Maybe you'll
Really?
enjoy that one.
Okay. Well, you know what? I probably should have asked you this before, because people were kind of talking about stuff like when Mandalorian came up. I should have brought this up, which I know apparently is a touchy subject with you guys, but Akira Kurosawa, a lot of his stuff.
We're going to get to that.
Okay, all right. So when we get to it,
We'll get to that, but I love your thinking. I know where you're going.
All right, so
We're very close to that. So hold your thought.
So I'll
close.
zip my mouth and.
Next one, guys. I know this is another one by Trini and some of the other guys in the chat. Lee Van Cleef again, spaghetti western. He's a big man, like he's a big star in these spaghetti westerns. As I've said, like Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, he's right up there. And this is Death Rides the Horse. I actually watched this again recently with Trini on a stream, and love it. Very violent, gritty, very dark. This is probably one of the more darker westerns you ever see. It's great. A lot of violence. There is rape in there at the beginning, and it's just a vengeance movie. And I really enjoy western vengeance movies, and that's basically what this is. So have to put it in my list for sure. Death Rides a Horse. And now for this is an item that's don't make deals with me, because I'm not selling this. This is the Django set that's now out of print and worth a lot of money. There is a steelbook that came with this to the Arrow, and yeah, I'm not selling it, so don't make me any offers. Obviously by the very iconic Italian actor Franco Nero, directed by Sergio Corbucci, who's basically like the second in line after Leone. He was the next kind of big spaghetti western director, and this pretty much set off the genre. This and the Dollars Trilogy set off a ton of spaghetti westerns. There was tons of spaghetti westerns called Django this, Django that, Django versus Tana, and obviously Tarantino finally did it with Django Unchained. So this set the scene. Very violent, gritty, worth watching like with the Italian on the English subtitles, because you get more of a feel. I feel some of these like spaghetti westerns, if you watch it in English, it kind of takes away from the story and it gets kind of campy. So yeah, Franco Nero was great. Sort of took on the sort of Clint Eastwood type role in these films. He did a couple of Django films, I believe, and as I said, spawned a lot of sequels and missed remakes and all sorts of things. So Django is a must in my list. And we just talked about it, so not much to say here. But Django Unchained,
Uh-huh.
I actually really enjoy it. So you have seen this
Yeah,
movie,
no,
right?
I have multiple copies of that actually. So
Yeah.
I don't think I have that steelbook. I have a steelbook, not that one.
Yeah, so I mean, we just talked about already. Obviously, Tarantino was inspired by this Django, and it's just more of the same. Jamie Foxx really good. I love Leo in it.
Sure.
I think he's probably one of his better roles
Sure.
as Calvin Candy, and the whole. I mean, you know the story about when he smashed his
Actually
hands,
cut his hand.
during
Yeah.
cut his hand. He kept going, and you can see if you watch it, you can see like the bleed. It's
Yeah.
bleeding through his
Yeah, and he
fingers.
takes a look down at his hand, and he just kind of.
Yeah.
That's an actor.
That's right, and then he doesn't he smother like the girl with
Yeah,
blood on her
yeah.
face or-
I don't know if
Yeah.
if because I'm trying to remember. I remember thinking, I don't know if I was working with him, if I'd be cool with some dude. Listen, you didn't take any tests or anything before we went to. Don't be rubbing your shit in my face. I don't know what diseases you have. I'm
Yeah.
really intrigued to know the story behind him rubbing the blood on her face because.
Well, maybe like they washed the real blood and they put
Yeah,
the fake blood. Or
I'm
something.
wondering if maybe it was something like that where they're like,
Yeah.
oh, let's do something with that, but
It's just it's funny because like you notice it the next scene when he's got the bandage
Yeah.
wrapped up, that's like
Yeah.
real and yeah.
it's one thing to be method, but it's another thing to be you're just shooting a film after all. You got to worry about people's health.
Exactly. Nah, so as I said, I love Django Unchained.
Uh-huh.
It's again, you put that up there with one of my favorite modern westerns that's come out in the last 20, 30 years. So
See now,
yeah, I enjoyed
what
that.
makes Django Unchained like I have like difficulty understanding why that's technical. Like, what makes a western a western? Like, it's just what the location of the movie because
Well, I mean, Django for me, like, because I know so much about the spaghetti western, and that's kind of what it is. I mean, you haven't explored that genre too much yet. You'll see if you watch, like, say, if you watch the original Django and the sort of some of those Lee Van Cleef westerns, you'll see what it is. It's just sort of more heightened, a lot of it on the western genre. It's more like, as I said, more violent, gritty. There's some comedic elements. It sort of bends the rules a little bit about what a western is, and that's kind of why I think the Italians really like doing that, and that's why there was so many. Like basically in the 60s and 70s, Italy was just full of spaghetti westerns. That's the only thing they were making.
Christoph Waltz's character is a bounty hunter, and
German.
yeah, like that's the only thing that I could think is synonymous with what I know to be westerns. Other than that, it's a story about like, listen, it takes place in that period. I get that, but it's a story about a guy who's a slave trader, and yeah. So I don't know when I think of westerns there's just something about
Yeah, I
it.
mean, Tarantino's kind of added liberties
Yeah.
to it as well. Like, he had some humor in there with the Ku Klux Klan and
Oh,
when they
yeah.
had the bags
Yeah,
over their
yeah.
heads and that little scene there. And so, yeah, you're right. But I think it's sort of like the standing of Django, like Jamie Foxx, this African-American character, and like just how he's the hero of this film. And, he's kind of like becomes like a gunfighter, and that's kind of bends the rules
Oh, sure.
because of that time. It's just funny. Remember in the movie when he rides on the horse, like, everyone's looking like, "What's he doing
Yeah.
on a horse?" You know what I mean?
And
Yeah, I think that's what Tarantino was trying to do.
Tarantino goes, for as much as I say the dialogue's a little iffy and Unforgiven, Tarantino goes a little far in the other direction, and I think the guy drops an N-bomb. Hey, that's an M on a horse, and there's just silliness in that movie where, like when he shoots people, they like. They fly. It's in that
And then
third act.
even the soundtrack, you got like a rap
Yeah.
in there, and like
Yeah.
a really like new soundtrack. You got some Ennio Morricone in there. Like it's nuts.
Yeah.
And that whole scene at the end when he's shooting, they're all coming
Yeah.
through the door, and he's like bang bang
Yeah.
bang. It's nuts, but I like it. I do. It's another one.
No, I
We're
love
talking
it.
about it so much. I want to.
I know, I love it. It's just like I need a proper definition. Like, I come to this argument every now and again when it comes to drama and comedy. Like which genre do you put something in? Sure, there's a bunch of dramas that make you laugh. Doesn't technically make it a comedy. So I guess that's my nitpick here when it comes to Django Unchained with westerns. I'm not well defined on what makes the genre.
Yeah.
So.
Talking about it now again. I want to. So I'll put that and treat into you, man, because I want to watch that again. So I must continue on
Okay.
though, because Must continue on. So these kind of go together. I mean, we've talked about it a lot. I've talked about it so much on my channel.
Yep.
The two
Yep.
dollars trilogy, Fistful of Dollars, and for a few dollars more. Actually, this for guys in the chat, this is actually my favorite Western of all time.
Wow.
This is it.
Okay.
This is the big one. Yeah, it just edges out Good, Bad, and the Ugly, which is my second favorite, just a little bit more. Don't really know exactly why. I think I just like the sort of team up between Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef, because they're two sort of bounty hunters after this notorious villain played by Gian Maria Vallanti, who was in a lot of spaghetti westerns as well. And I just like how they're after him for different reasons. Like Clint Eastwood's kind of after him for the money. Lee Van Cleef is a bit more personal, so I like that. I like a lot of the gunfights in this, all the great duels. The music by Ennio Morricone is right on, and just something about like Lee Van Cleef in this film. It kind of tops Clint Eastwood, to be honest, in this one. I don't know, it's something in his eyes and just how he's like the older sort of guy, and Clint Eastwood's more young and brash, and just how it's almost like a father figure in a way Lee Van Cleef was to Clint Eastwood.
Having seen all three, I would say that's my least favorite of the three, ironically enough.
Wow.
Yeah. There's something about
any reason
when they get let go by what's his face?
Indio, Gian Maria Vallanti.
Yeah, there's something that takes me out of that. My suspension of disbelief, like there's something about that I'm just like, he wouldn't. Why would he do that? And
well, he's a madman. 'Cause he was like maybe smoking like marijuana. And actually, funnily enough, that was one of the first movies ever where you see a character smoke marijuana. It might have been the first, because obviously these Italian directors, they bent the rules. They didn't care like censorship. Also, these movies, because I don't know if you've noticed, well, you probably haven't because you haven't seen a lot of the older westerns that we've talked about. A lot of the film you don't see like people getting shot, like it goes from one take to another. These films, it's all in one take. You see like the gunfire and people getting killed. So that's what you see in a lot of these Sergio Leone westerns, and that's what carried forward in the Clint Eastwood films. These earlier ones are more tame. Like this, you see all the violence. There's no takes. There's no different camera shots. It's all there. So
yeah,
I really like that.
I'm sorry. When I was doing homework and writing everything down, El Topo, which just wasted, by the way, because I had visual aids, I swear, but most of them weren't coming up. El Topo, when I was looking for images, there's one image, like if you Google El Topo, within the top 15 images, there's just like a lot of people dead and bloody, and it's quite graphic.
Spaghetti Western for you. So as I said, the reason why I like this, my favorite, it's just a lot of great memories with it. Again, I think it was one of the ones I probably watched early in my life, and just has everything I love, and I can just rewatch it. Always enjoy it. Just a little bit on this one, the original Fistful of Dollars, the first of the trilogy, and probably one of the first what made Clint Eastwood a star. It's very vanilla, but it's cool. And now you can kind of bring in your Kurosawa, because this was a remake of Yojimbo, so take it away on that.
So Yojimbo, another thing in the house, not watched it yet. I was referencing like a lot of Kurosawa stuff. Well, Seven Samurai, obviously. We'll get to that later, but
we're close. We're not far away.
So a couple of Kurosawa's movies definitely feel like, sure, they're samurai movies. There's other things going on, but there's similarities. There's parallels to the Western genre that I would say of the Kurosawa movies that I've seen. I just watched Rashomon recently. There's just a bunch of parallels to the Western genre. Granted, it's a different period. It's a different country altogether, but there's similarities. There's no guns with these samurai flicks. So, how do you feel with Kurosawa being brought up? I mean, they outright retake one of his movies and reappropriate it.
I mean,
so
this Sergio Leone, this is basically the same, because Clint Eastwood in this film plays like the middleman between these two towns who are like fighting over each other, fighting over this one place. So these two like town barons or sheriffs or whatever, and Yeah, I mean, I've never been a huge Kurosawa fan as far as like I haven't seen all his films.
Yeah.
I guess just growing up with westerns and having this great passion of westerns, I'm always going to choose these particular
Right.
films over the samurai ones. I do enjoy I enjoyed Yojimbo. I watched that I think last year, and I've seen Seven Samurai, which we'll get onto in a sec. But yeah, just the Western for me, like especially this one at the beginning, just coming in this town, the music's happening, has that little gunfight at the beginning. It's just a badass Clint Eastwood. It just really set the scene for the other two movies in the trilogy, and then spaghetti westerns in general, and then his own movies later on in the 70s and 80s.
What does that say that I'm more like I want to watch more Yojimbo more than Stagecoach right now? It's really kind of odd.
That's I might have to eject you in a minute. I don't know.
They're
but
both
yeah,
under the roof. I don't know why.
Exactly. So to sum these two up, yeah, love them, and they're gonna be my list. And yeah, get on to that. So the next one, the last Sergio Leone kind of western that he did, Fistful of Dynamite, which was a Kino Lorber release as well, and actually getting the Master of Cinema release that's just released recently. This focuses on the Mexican Revolution, Rod Steiger and James Coburn, and this is probably another one I recommend you watching. You've done the trilogy. You need to finish Once Upon a Time in the West, because I know you started and then you got tired, and then probably give this a go.
I need another Fistful movie.
It's a little different. It takes a different edge because it's not really on the West. It's more on that Mexican Revolution, and it's the sort of technology's growing a bit. So yeah, I think James Coburn's really good in it.
Okay.
Rod Steiger's always good in his movies. So probably not the same scale as like Good, Bad, and the Ugly and Once Upon a Time in the West.
Well, that's not
but
saying
it's
much. I mean, those two are just gigantic when it comes to scale and.
I know they're giant movies, they're epic movies. This doesn't reach that epicness, but it's still good. It's still enjoyable. A bit more comedic, a little bit with James Coburn, because he's like a dynamite addict. He's always blowing things up and stuff. So
Interesting.
Yeah, it's fun.
Okay.
So that's Fistful of Dynamite, or the alternative name, Duck You Sucker. That's it. Next one, we go to John Wayne and Robert Mitchum, who I mentioned earlier, El Dorado. This one directed by Howard Hawks, and this is part of a little trilogy that Howard Hawks did. We talked about Rio Bravo earlier. This is kind of the second one. I mean, there's no relation to it. There's just John Wayne, Howard Hawks did these three, and also Rio Lobo, which is the third one. And this is pretty much the same story of Rio Bravo. It doesn't really go away from that. Robert Mitchum plays the drunk, which Dean Martin was in Rio Bravo. John Wayne basically plays the same character. You got James Caan in this, who plays the young, brash guy, which Ricky Nelson did in Rio Bravo. So there is a lot of similarities, but it's just such a likable film, and the chemistry between John Wayne and Robert Mitchum is great. James Caan, I think, did this not long before Godfather.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, yep. Young in it and really good. So, yeah, this is just one of those Sunday afternoon type movies. You know, you're chilling with whatever, nothing else is on, relaxing day, El Dorado. So, that's a favorite of mine.
El Dorado.
Yeah. Next one, probably in my mind, apart from like the Dollars trilogy and maybe Django, maybe the other one, Death Rides a Horse, maybe one of the best spaghetti westerns of all time. That is The Great Silence, Sergio Corbucci. This one's with Jean-Louis Trintignant and Klaus Kinski, who was in a lot of westerns as well. And Tarantino took a lot of inspiration from this when he did Hateful Eight, for sure, because this movie, unlike a lot of westerns, is set in the snow. You don't see that many westerns. It's always usually the hot sort of Arizona or outback type thing in Australia.
I lit purposely with a sunburnt theme, so yeah, there's a lot of orange.
All sunburnt, hot, dry, but this one's set in the snow, and it's just such a dark western. The reason why I don't want to talk too much about it, because it's just something, if I do, it will just spoil it all. It's a brilliant film. The soundtrack to this is great. I think it's Ennio Morricone again. Klaus Kinski is such an evil villain in this. He's a real nasty piece of work, and I love it. So highly recommend this for people getting into the Western genre, and more so the spaghetti Western genre. So that's The Great Silence. Yep, we're nearly getting there.
Yeah, there's
Not
two
far.
I'm waiting for, and
Yeah. I know one's next. The Twilight Time, my boy Paul Newman again, Ombre, which was I was kind of surprised this wasn't in the book itself because this is very similar to Stagecoach. This film, you got Paul Newman. He's like a sort of quiet. He was brought up by Indians, and he becomes a sort of quiet gunfighter. And I don't know what it is with me. I kind of like that character, whether it's Clint Eastwood playing that or another guy, that sort of mysterious guy. You don't know much about him, but he's just cool. And I don't know. And Paul Newman plays that really well. And this is a good film. I've seen it quite a few times in the last couple of years. Martin Ritt, who also did HUD, which we talked about earlier. And Paul Newman, this was in his prime. He was doing a lot of good movies. I think this one was just before Butch Cassidy. So he really fitted the Western genre well. And yeah, great film. Hombre. And now this one you have probably seen and you want me to talk about.
yes, there it is.
The Magnificent Seven. So go
Dun,
ahead.
dun, dun, dun. Well, it's adapted from Seven Samurai, right? It's essentially what I was leading into before with Kurosawa. I'll say I know you're not a fan of Kurosawa. If I had to choose between the two, I would take Seven Samurai over Magnificent Seven. That's not saying much though. I own Magnificent Seven. I mean, you said it before. So Kurosawa, lent a lot of what he did with how he made films to the Western genre. So, turnabout is fair play. And here's Magnificent Seven taking something that he did and going even further with the Western genre. And to have the seven... Well, it's been a while since I've seen Magnificent Seven. The
Seven Gunmen?
Yeah, they've got a bit of a... They all resort to a town, right?
Oh, yeah, well, at the beginning, what happens, I'll fill
Thank you.
There's a gang of Mexican outlaws, there's 40 of them, headed by Eli Wallach, Tuco from Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and they sort of raid this village, and they keep stealing from them, so these villagers have had enough.
And
so they go out and seek out gunfighters to help them solve their problem, and obviously the first guy they come up with is Yul Brynner, Chris Adams, and such a great actor, Yul Brynner. He's got that great, iconic look. You got my boy, Steve McQueen, who's just... the coolest gunfighter out there. You got Charles Bronson, James Coburn. So just a whole team of great actors in this film. And this one, as I talked about earlier with Shane, Broken Arrow, is one of the first westerns I've ever saw. I love it a lot. It's so much nostalgia for me. That music, I love that. And just, the seven of these guys from, different backgrounds all coming together, helping this Mexican village out from these outlaws. And I just love it. And I think the chemistry between him and Steve McQueen, which wasn't great on set, actually, is good on screen.
See, so that's the thing that I would think is subverted from the Western genre is a bunch of people working together, where normally you have this lone dude. I mean, the good, the bad, and the ugly is kind of famous,
lone
right?
fighter.
It's just a bunch of dudes doing their own thing. Even when they're working together, they're kind of working together to go against one another. So the fact that they do all team up is kind of subverted for the genre, or for my knowledge of the genre, at least.
It was such a big film in its day because all these actors, some was just starting out and some had made their place in Hollywood. So to have all these actors together, it was a big deal. And as I said, they did make a remake recently, 2016. Antoine Fuqua. We had Denzel Washington, Ethan Hawke,
Chris Pratt.
Who else? Chris Pratt was in there, and that really good Korean actor. He was in there. And I liked that as well, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was quite good for such a big fan of this. I was a little worried that should they do that again? But I quite enjoyed it. I actually watched it again recently. And
the remake?
Speaking of that,
Sorry.
They did that. No worries. Speaking of the Wild Bunch, because I wanted to bring that up before, that they're actually doing a remake of that. Mel Gibson's going to come out next year and do that. So they are slowly doing remakes of some of these classic westerns. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been long enough, and it's been brought up a couple times. I don't remember who specifically, but the comic book movie craze has been compared to the westerns. The modern day western is the comic book movie, where we just keep it's kind of the same shit, and we're getting 4 or 5 of them a year. And they're trying to see if people are open to some stuff that would have been considered saturated a couple of years back. So,
right.
If you have to use a name that you recognize, then so be it. But
well, as I said, I think it just goes through time stages. Like westerns were so oversaturated back in the 50s, 60s, and probably even earlier, and then it sort of stopped. And then in the 80s, there wasn't as many, and then 90s a couple, and then recently been here and there. But yeah, it's kind of doing that with the superhero movies, I find, because in my mind, like these cowboys, these gunfighters, kind of were like the superheroes,
Right.
So yeah. Anyway, moving on. Not the poll's getting less and less, so we're getting there. Another Kino Lorber, Marlon Brando, Jack Nicholson, The Missouri Breaks, and highly recommend this one. Not a lot of people talk about this film. Marlon Brando, I'm a huge Marlon Brando fan. He's probably one of my favorite actors of all time, and he's just crazy, this one. He plays like an Irish bounty hunter. He's got the accent and all, and he's just super weird. And I know Marlon Brando did that a lot in these movies, like kind of after Godfather. He's always in these character-driven roles. And Jack Nicholson, I mean, you don't see him in too many westerns, but he did play in a couple before he got into One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and some of the other great dramas that he did. So very simple movie. Again, you feel sorry for Jack Nicholson because it's him and his brothers. They're kind of bank robbers and just trying to make a living for themselves, and that's the only way they know how. They're sort of cattle ranchers, and cattle, that's what they're doing. So yeah, the town hires Marlon Brando to sort of stop them and goes from there. So there's a really good scene between Marlon Brando and Jack Nicholson. It's probably one of the best in the film, just kind of a mano a mano type scene. And yeah, I think it's really good and highly recommend to anyone to watch this one, because it doesn't really get a lot of love.
That's the one thing I would associate with westerns. When I think of a western, I think 2 guys standing across from one another getting ready to shoot each other. That's like if you asked me to summarize the genre in a photo, I would have 2 guys just.
It's crazy because a great scene here just from memory now, like Jack Nicholson he's becoming a bit of a farmer, so he's planting all these plants and his crops. Marlon Brando just comes and kind of faces him, just shoots all the crops and damages it all, and it's just that really cool scene together. So yeah, it's good. So I recommend that one. I think that was 1976, so mid 70s, so a little bit different. Yeah. And I know we talked about this off air, Marlon Brando theme again, One-Eyed Jacks, the other Criterion. That was 1961, and this is the only film that Marlon Brando directed. So, yeah, quite iconic. Any interest in
Is there any poker in it? Because One-Eyed Jacks is certainly a card reference. So I'm.
Yeah, there's a little bit, but it sort of focuses on 2 guys. They're a desperate guy. They're sort of planning this bank robbery, but one of them betrays Marlon Brando, and it sort of goes on a revenge type path. So you
betrayal.
Kind of see what's coming. Yeah, betrayal again. The Western genre is full of it. It's played by, what's his name? Carl Malden, who's in a lot of classic movies. So yeah, it's good. It's kind of interesting direction from Marlon Brando, being his only movie. So it's kind of questions why he didn't do more, maybe. I think he kind of fits the Western genre quite well. I mean, he didn't do a lot apart from that one and Missouri Breaks, which I just mentioned. So yeah, I kind of like it. I certainly have to rewatch it because it's been a while since I've seen it, and yeah, I think it fits well for the Criterion genre collection. Yeah, that's that. Roger, if he's still there, he mentioned this in the chat a bit earlier. This is the Australian Western Proposition. Really good film that came out in 2005 with Guy Pearce and Ray Winstone. It's all set in the Australian outbacks. It's all to do with Australian outlaws, and yeah, it kind of has that nice feel to it. Quite violent as well, which I like. I think that's kind of me with westerns. I like my violence. I don't know what that says about me, but yeah. it's a screenplay by Nick Cave, actually, who's a singer, if anyone knows that. But yeah, Guy Pearce really does well in this film. I'm surprised he hasn't done more westerns because he really did well in this. Ray Winstone's always good. And yeah, it's just a really good film that came out in 2005. So probably another one that, if you're talking about modern westerns, probably one of the better ones. Okay, I think that one. Well, your moment has arrived. Your moment has arrived to your stream. Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Tombstone.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. I'll let you bring it.
So I'll tell the story of how I came across this. This was purely an accident. I had, some of you might remember, I was really sick a couple of weeks, maybe months ago now, where I had to go to the hospital. I had a high fever and was just in terrible shape. I was in terrible shape and just laying down, just whatever, just not wanting to move. I didn't want to do much with the TV. Certainly didn't want to get up and put a disc in a stupid player. That's for sure. So just put the TV on, and here was Tombstone. I'm like, oh, that's a Western. And Jase has been up my ass. I can just accidentally watch a Western movie, and I was actually quite captivated by it. There's some things about this movie that scream 1980s, early 90s, like some of the score, the soundtrack, some of the Foley work, the sound effects, like when the lightning is striking and he's walking through town. That
some of the locations.
Some of it feels a little extravagant and a little heavy on the action, but I'm okay with that. Like, you got to think about the time it was made and the stuff that was being made at that time. And if you can tolerate that, there's a lot. I mean, Val Kilmer in this movie
Doc Holliday
could be. Yeah. I don't think of Val Kilmer when I think of a decent actor. And holy shit, he's incredible in this movie.
I'm your Huckleberry.
I hate him already.
Johnny Ringo. I hate him already. I love it. Yeah, he's whole, because he's obviously drinking.
He's sick, right?
He's dying. He's sick. He's just about dying, and just that performance is great. And just Kurt Russell as like Wild Earp, because Wild Earp, you kind of like reading Western folklore and all that. This tough sort of guy, and I think Kurt Russell really does it well. Even his brothers, you got Sam Elliott and Bill Paxton in there.
Yeah.
I think that works well. Yeah. And Michael Biehn is Johnny Ringo.
I know. It's right off the bat, like with the red sashes. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's Michael Biehn. That's the Terminator dude.
Yeah, Johnny Ringo. So it's just got a lot of great actors and the great telling of Wyatt Earp, because we've mentioned it a couple of times in the movies. That story seems to be very popular with Western people and Western directors. They like telling the Wyatt Earp and the Tombstone story. So I really enjoy it. Again, it's going to be up there as one of the best modern westerns.
I think the way they build the tension is really quite impressive too, because there's a bunch of like I said, what I associate with westerns is a showdown, and when Johnny Ringo and Doc Holliday, is that his name? Val Kilmer's?
Kilmer? Yeah, Doc Holliday.
When they're just kind of swinging their dicks with each other and speaking in Latin. It's a showdown. Like, that they're just going at it, and it's just them showing off with their knowledge of Latin. But it slowly builds from talking to
the great sort of twist too, when you think that Kurt Russell's going to face Johnny Ringo, but what comes out of the darkness?
I'm your Huckleberry,
I'm your Huckleberry, because he knew he wouldn't be able to handle it. He's too fast. So. Yeah, it's got it all, man. Like, even the scene with Kurt Russell is like, no. He's just walking through the water, just shooting.
He
wasn't going to put up. Exactly, like Darth Vader. So,
a little silly, but I'll take it. Yeah, and it
kind of a little bit mystical, but I like
the OK Corral stuff isn't the finale. That's right. So you would think the OK Corral shootout would be the end, but no, there's a whole nother act to go after that. So
it's just nice because even they tell you at the end, because Robert Mitchum does the narration at the beginning and the little part at the end, and he sort of says, well, he finally married that woman and spent 30 years together. They were meant to be together, so it was nice they tied up that part too.
Yeah, it was
had kids because he wasn't really interested in that. His previous wife, like she
that
was an
opium
taker
addict,
or what.
that whore.
Yeah, so she was an addict, so he's had that relationship.
I've got a headache.
Nah,
Take some
Tombstone's
opium.
Oh man. So yeah, great choice, and I'm glad you finally.
I
gave
enjoy
that
it.
another
I
chance.
really, that's
Yeah.
the one Western that I've watched twice since I've been on this little journey. But yeah, it's up there for me. Not as much as The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but it's probably something I would go to more. It's a bit more. It's not as serious, so it's a lot easier to go down. It's not so much
That's
like
right.
medicine.
Not as that sort of way.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. I think one of the last ones I'm going to show here today. One of my favorite movies. This is probably in my top 5 westerns of all time. Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider. One of the few westerns that I enjoy from the 80s, because as I said, the 80s was a time where the westerns were pretty much dead. There wasn't too many westerns in there. I mean, there might have been a few spoofs, but the genre at the time was basically gone. But Clint Eastwood, he knows how to bring back a genre, and he did with Pale Rider, which is basically like a sequel or a remake of High Plains Drifter. It's a very similar type character. Clint Eastwood kind of draws in the mystical, supernatural feel as far as, is this guy actually real? Is he an angel? Is he alive? Is he a ghost? Because that's kind of what the feel has to it, and it's a great movie. He kind of comes into this like miners camp, and he helps them out against, again, usual sort of western, typical like land baron who wants to take over their land and sell it for a high price. And yeah, Clint Eastwood's just so good in this, so likable, and I really had a great time with this. One of the little cameos in this is Jaws from the Bond films. He's like Richard Kiel. He has a couple little moments in this film which is memorable. So yeah, this is Clint Eastwood at his best. I probably prefer this one than Outlaw Josie Wales, and it's just right up there with High Plains Drifter. Like, you could probably watch those two movies back to back, because yeah, they're very similar in the way they're made and the story they're trying to tell. So love Pale Rider, one of the few 80s westerns. I think you should give this one a go.
Really? Okay.
Yep. Okay, and that pretty much sums it up for me, man, over here. Yeah.
Okay. So, if you had to be a salesman right now for the Western genre, what would be your selling point to somebody who's never watched a Western? Or, I mean, here I am, half a year removed from when we first like sat down and said, you know what, we should do one of these for Westerns, and I was reluctant. I didn't want to. I had this preconceived notion that Westerns are cheesy. They're something that I really don't respect. And here I am half a year later saying, no, there's movies that I quite enjoy, and I'm much more open to watching more of them than I was even when we first started. Even 3 months ago. You've played some things up. Some things, it's just figuring out your style and where.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. It's like figuring out what your style of film is. Like, some people like dark, gritty movies. We're talking about any genre here. Others like more comic relief type films, or comedy, dramas, stuff like that. So you sort of want to take that and put it into like a sect genre like horror or Western, which we're talking about now. So I think that's what you got to do. I think a lot of people get like intimidated by Westerns. They think they're boring. Like, they think, oh, John Wayne, very corny. But there's just so many different types of Westerns, as I've discussed for the last 2 hours or whatever it's been. Spaghetti Westerns, more violent, the Clint Eastwood type Westerns, Gary Cooper, John Wayne, they're all very different. They're all not the same. So if you don't like one select section of Westerns, your chances are you might like another section of Westerns. So that's how I would approach it. I mean, it's certainly not boring. Like, I think there's a movie, everything that I've gone through today, which has been a lot.
Well,
there's something in there for everyone, sure.
Well, what about working backwards? Like a lot of people brought up Logan. Logan is a great movie, and it has Western themes to it. The WILI of my channel stands for Will I Like It. My thing would be, all right, so I'm going to ask you to do it for me, because I have no knowledge. If somebody like Logan, what would be their next step? in the Western genre?
I think again, Clint Eastwood film,
Okay.
Unforgiven, or a High Plains Drifter, or one of the violent ones. You're not going to go from Logan to like John Wayne.
Uh-huh.
You're not going to do that. I think you're going to go Clint Eastwood, or hey, one of the ones we talked about earlier, like 3:10 to Yuma, or something like that, something violent. Even a movie that came out, I think 2 years ago, Hostiles, which I didn't talk about. Christian Bale, that's a good one too. So yeah, I think you'd go Clint Eastwood though, Unforgiven.
Another one that I saw earlier was Bone Tomahawk, which
Yes.
blends
Yes.
horror with the Western genre. So
A lot of people talked about that. Probably another good stepping stone. I've watched that a couple of times and said it's a slow burn at the start, but that third act, that ending, it's just nuts. Horror movie, crazy. These cannibal savages, what they do. So yeah, I think you got to start with that. Like, work backwards. If you love a movie like Logan, go back to that. You like a heist type of film, work backwards to that. Like, I always feel Clint Eastwood's a good place to start. Those westerns are very like, there's something in there for everyone. They're not boring. They're quite fairly fast paced. They're violent. They're gritty. They're not corny. So start there. If you like those, move on. And then if you really want to explore, go to those acid westerns we talked about, El Topo, or spaghetti western, which I'm a big fan of. Like, I didn't start there. Like, it took time. Only in the last probably 5-6 years I really got into that particular subgenre of westerns. So there's even Oriental westerns. The Good, Bad, and the Weird is a really good Korean western, which is basically like a spin-off from Good, Bad, and the Ugly. So a lot of countries have done their own thing. There's one called Red Sun, which is a Chinese type western. Even I think there's one called Sukiyawa Django, which is a Japanese. Tarantino's
got that Django name in there though.
Yep, Django name is used everywhere. So yeah, it's just finding your feel to it, and not to be intimidated by it, and just to start familiar with an actor like Clint Eastwood's very iconic. So start there, and then you start exploring like the John Waynes, the Henry Fondas, or the Gary Coopers, Robert Mitchums. So that's kind of what you got to do when you're looking for getting into westerns. I mean, I've tried to do a sales pitch here for the last 2 hours, showed all my knowledge. Hopefully it wasn't too boring.
No, you know what you're talking about.
I had fun, so.
So lastly, Jase, I'm pretty sure we'll have you on again. I really my goal is to get Luke from Razor Wire Reviews, because like he hasn't. If you really enjoy this idea, the 1,001 movies you must see before you die, Luke has an entire video series based on the book, where he's going through the book. I want to get a bunch of us together where you guys can do all the talking and I make everything look pretty. But certainly I'm assuming Clint Eastwood, if we get to talking about him, we'll have you back for that. But other than that, Jase, what would people talk about your channel for a second if people want to go check you out?
Well, there's not much on there, guys, but I do actually have a complete Western collection. So some of the stuff you saw earlier, and there's more stuff. I've got a complete collection on there. I've got a couple of Blu-ray collections on there, and I'm going to be focusing on James Bond series. I've kind of got something in the works because the new one's coming out next year. I'm a pretty big Bond fan, for those who don't know. But on Letterboxd, probably good to follow me on there, Jase Aussie Goz, because I have my complete Western list on there. I've got over 200 Westerns on there, so an ultimate list. So hey, if, like, you learned something from today or want to know something about it, you'll see a list, go on there and you'll check it out. So yeah, as my final words here, just really appreciate you bringing me into this series. Had a really great time. I know it's not totally your thing.
I'm getting there. You
gain something from it, because as I said, I've loved this genre since I was a boy, and this kind of was a great sort of just overview on it, and I had a blast. So thanks for
being here, and thanks to everybody in the chat who have been here the whole time. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again sometime soon. Just stay tuned to both channels for one thing or another.
Yep, I do streams, guys, on the weekends usually, or some of my other friends in the chat do. So just, you can always join them. I'm not afraid to have anyone in there talking whatever, because I don't just talk about westerns. Quite good on a few other genres and stuff. So, and I'll probably end up making you buy something. That's my talents. That's a talent of mine, with this man would know. So yeah, it's, if anyone hasn't subbed to my channel or wants to, just for that, yeah, do that, because I don't put out a lot of content, but I do streams, and I welcome anyone in the chat or on the live thing. It's a little bit hard now with StreamYard because there's only 6, but I go on for quite a few hours, so everyone's coming and going, so there's always a place. So there you go.
Guys, so we'll see you next time. Again, thanks for joining us.